The desert sun beat down mercilessly on Fort Irwin as Captain Robert Iron Bob Harmon stood motionless atop the observation platform. At 58, his weathered face told stories that no military manual ever could. 3 decades of war had etched themselves into every line around his eyes. Those same eyes now studied the barren landscape of the National Training Center with the practiced calm of a man who had seen battlefields across generations. Below him, a convoy of vehicles kicked up dust clouds that shimmered in the heat. The centerpiece was unmistakable even from this distance. The experimental Sentinel, its 8 wheels supporting a modular chassis unlike anything the Army had fielded before. Impressive, isn't she? Harmon didn't turn at the voice. He'd recognized the approaching footsteps long before Colonel Gardner had spoken. 35 years in armored warfare taught you to identify threats by sound alone. Looks aren't everything in combat, Harmon replied, his voice carrying the graveled texture of command and cigarettes. Neither are PowerPoint presentations. Gardner stepped beside him, pressing perfectly manicured hands against the railing. Everything about the man seemed manufactured, from his spotless uniform to his calculated smile. He'd spent his career climbing ladders, not leading men into fire. The future of American ground forces, Gardner continued as if Harmon hadn't spoken. Fully networked battlefield integration, interchangeable mission modules, 3 hours from combat transport to forward deployment. Harmon finally turned to face him. How does she handle under sustained enemy fire when the computers go down and your boys are taking hits from 3 directions? Gardner's smile tightened. Captain Harmon, with all due respect, warfare has evolved. The Sentinel represents a paradigm shift in how we approach modern combat. Men still die the same way, Harmon said quietly. Gardner checked his watch with exaggerated precision. Your evaluation team should be assembled in the briefing room. I understand you've chosen an interesting mix of personnel. Harmon nodded once. My people. Just remember, Gardner added, his voice dropping to a near whisper. This project has the attention of the Pentagon and Congress. $2 billion doesn't allow for sentimentality about the old ways. As Gardner walked away, Harmon felt the familiar weight settle across his shoulders. He'd carried it since Vietnam. The responsibility of bringing men home alive mattered more than any stars on a shoulder or budget on a spreadsheet. The Sentinel gleamed below, its composite armor panels catching the sunlight. Something about its proportions bothered him, though he couldn't yet articulate why. 35 years of instinct rarely led him wrong. Harmon took one last look at the vehicle before heading to the briefing room. Time to meet his team for this final mission before retirement. One last chance to ensure the next generation of American soldiers wouldn't pay for political expedience with their blood. The air conditioning inside the main building hit like a wall of relief after the desert heat. Harmon moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency, returning salutes from younger soldiers who recognized him immediately. His reputation preceded him, as it had for decades. The briefing room door was propped open. Inside sat 3 individuals who couldn't have looked more different from one another, yet Harmon had selected each personally. Master Sergeant Frank Miller looked up first, his craggy face breaking into a rare smile. At 53, Miller had been with Harmon since the jungles of Vietnam. They'd crossed the Iraqi border together in '91 too, when most men their age were behind desks. Captain, Miller said, rising to his feet, they actually let you pick your own team. Must be a brave new world. Or they're hoping we'll fail spectacularly, Harmon replied, the ghost of a smile crossing his face. Troop Sergeant Sarah Williams remained seated, her attention focused on the stack of technical manuals before her. At 35, she represented the bridge between generations, raised on computers but trained in the unforgiving school of practical engineering. Her father had served with Harmon years ago, sacrificing his life to save 3 others when their vehicle hit a mine outside Fallujah. Sir, she acknowledged, finally looking up, I've been reviewing the Sentinel specs. The modular interface design is fascinating, but I've got questions about stress tolerances at the connection points. Save them, Harmon replied. We'll get plenty of sales pitch from the manufacturer. I want your independent assessment. The final team member stood by the window, back straight in the manner of academy graduates everywhere. Lieutenant James Cooper, 28 years old, West Point class of '88, top of his class in tactics and technology, 0 combat experience. Captain Harmon, Cooper said, stepping forward with hand extended. It's an honor, sir. Your Gulf War tactics are still taught at the academy. Harmon took the young man's hand, noting the firm grip that nonetheless lacked the calluses of fieldwork. "Lieutenant, I hope you're ready to look beyond the textbooks." "Yes, sir," Cooper replied with the confidence of youth. "I've studied all available material on next-generation armor systems. The modularity concept represents a quantum leap forward." Miller and Williams exchanged a glance that Cooper missed entirely. Harmon recognized it immediately. The silent communication of veterans who knew theory rarely survived first contact with the enemy. "Take a seat, everyone," Harmon said, moving to the head of the table. "Our official briefing with Colonel Gardner starts in 30 minutes. Before that happens, I want to be clear about our mission." The three faces looked back at him with varying degrees of expectation. "We are here to evaluate whether the Sentinel platform will keep American soldiers alive in combat conditions, not whether it satisfies procurement requirements or contractor specifications. Whether it will bring our people home." He paused, letting the words sink in. "This evaluation matters because someone's son or daughter will stake their life on our judgment. Remember that when the PowerPoints start flying." The room fell silent as Harmon distributed folders containing their security clearances and evaluation protocols. Outside, the desert shimmered beneath a sky so blue it hurt to look at. His mind wandered back to another desert, another time. February 1991, the vast emptiness of the Iraqi desert stretched before their column as dawn broke on the horizon. Harmon stood in the commander's hatch of his M1A1 Abrams, the bitter wind cutting through his chemical protection suit. Through his night vision, he'd watched Iraqi tank formations scattering before the relentless American advance. His battalion had been pushing north for 18 hours straight, the desert floor vibrating with the thunder of hundreds of armored vehicles. Intelligence reported a Republican Guard unit dug in ahead, their Soviet-built T-72s waiting in ambush positions. "Eyes sharp," he'd called down to his crew. "They're out there." Sergeant Peterson, his gunner, had scanned methodically through the thermal sight. "Nothing yet, Captain. Wait." His voice changed. "Multiple heat signatures at 2 o'clock, range approximately 2,000 meters." Harmon had felt the familiar crystallization of time that came before combat, every sense heightening, the world narrowing to what mattered for survival. "Driver, halt! Gunner, identify." "Sir, I count 7 T-72s in defilade positions. They don't appear to have spotted us." 7 tanks against his 4. The rest of the company was 5 minutes behind, delayed by a mechanical issue. "Sir," his radio operator had cut in, "Brigade is ordering immediate engagement. They want this position cleared before the main force arrives." Harmon had made his decision in seconds. "All tanks, this is Iron Horse 6. Deploy in echelon formation. We'll use the ridge for cover and engage from the flanks. Execute on my mark." What followed was 20 minutes of the most intense armored combat since World War II. Harmon's outnumbered platoon executed a perfect flanking maneuver, using their superior fire control systems to pick off the Iraqi tanks before they could effectively respond. When his executive officer's tank took a glancing hit that disabled its main gun, Harmon had personally positioned his Abrams to provide covering fire, exposing his own position to enemy shells that impacted just meters away. By the time the dust settled, all 7 Iraqi tanks burned against the desert horizon. Harmon had lost not a single man. That night, as his crew performed maintenance on their battered tank, a brigadier general had visited their position. "Textbook execution against superior numbers," the general had said, studying the battle map. "They'll teach this one at West Point." Harmon had simply nodded, knowing the credit belonged to his men and their training. The general had lingered, looking thoughtfully at the captain. "You know, Harmon, with your record, you could be wearing stars within a decade. Pentagon would welcome someone with your combat experience." "With respect, sir," Harmon had replied, "my place is with my tank and my men." The general had smiled sadly. "The Army is changing, Captain. Soon it'll be run by men who've never heard a round fired in anger. Remember that." Harmon had remembered. For the next 3 years, he'd watched the military downsize after the Gulf War victory, watched combat veterans pushed aside for managers and politicians in uniform. When they offered him a promotion that would take him from the field, he declined and requested to remain with armored units. The decision had cost him advancement, but preserved his soul. Now, as retirement approached, he found himself facing one final battle against an enemy that didn't bleed. Institutional momentum and political pressure driving a weapons system that might look good in demonstrations, but could fail when American lives were on the line. The memory dissolved as Lieutenant Cooper's voice pulled him back to the present. "Sir, the briefing is scheduled to begin in 5 minutes. Harmon nodded, gathering his materials. Let's go see what $8 billion buys these days. The main briefing hall had been transformed into a showcase for the Sentinel program. Glossy posters lined the walls, showing the vehicle in various configurations: troop transport, mobile command post, medical evacuation, and fire support. Scale models sat on display tables, surrounded by video screens running combat simulations. Colonel Gardner stood at the center of this technological temple, greeting various officers and civilian contractors with practiced charm. His eyes narrowed slightly when Harmon and his team entered. "Captain," Gardner called, gesturing them forward. "Perfect timing. I want to introduce you to the core design team." The introductions passed in a blur of handshakes and titles: defense contractors, systems engineers, procurement specialists. Each spoke with the same rehearsed enthusiasm about breakthrough capabilities and paradigm shifts. Finally, Gardner directed them to their seats as the lights dimmed for the presentation. The massive screen at the front of the room lit up with the Sentinel logo, an eagle grasping lightning bolts in its talons. "Gentlemen, ladies," Gardner began, his voice reverberating through the sound system, "today marks a historic transition in American land warfare capabilities." What followed was a 90-minute barrage of specifications, simulations, and projected performance metrics. The Sentinel's revolutionary two-part design received particular emphasis, with animations showing how quickly the drive module could be paired with different mission modules. "From combat transport to field hospital in under 2 hours," Gardner announced proudly. "No other system in the world offers this level of battlefield adaptability." Throughout the presentation, Harmon made careful notes, watching not just the slides but the reactions of his team. Williams frowned occasionally at technical details, her engineering mind clearly spotting discrepancies. Miller's expression remained neutral, the practiced poker face of a veteran NCO. Cooper leaned forward with obvious excitement, completely bought into the promise of technology. When the lights came back up, Gardner invited questions. Several officers asked predictable softballs about deployment timelines and integration with existing forces. Harmon remained silent, waiting. Finally, Gardner pointed in his direction. "Captain Harmon, I'm sure you have questions for us." The room quieted. Harmon's reputation for bluntness preceded him. "The connection points between your drive module and mission modules," Harmon said, his voice carrying easily without amplification. "What happens when they take a direct hit from an RPG or an explosively formed penetrator?" Gardner's smile dimmed slightly. "The interface is reinforced to military specifications for ballistic protection." "That's not what I asked," Harmon continued. "I asked what happens when the connection point fails under combat conditions. Does the crew maintain mobility? Can they continue to fight?" A nervous-looking engineer stepped forward. "The system is designed to maintain integrity under all expected battlefield conditions." Harmon looked directly at him. "Son, in combat, the enemy gets a vote on what conditions to expect." The room fell uncomfortably silent. "Another question," Harmon continued, flipping through his notes. "Your fuel system runs through access panels near those same connection points. What prevents a secondary fire from consuming the entire vehicle if those lines are compromised?" Gardner stepped in. "Captain, these are highly specific scenarios that our testing protocols will address in due course. Perhaps we should focus on the operational capabilities rather than hypothetical failure modes." "Men don't die hypothetically, Colonel." The tension in the room thickened. Gardner's face hardened momentarily before he manufactured another smile. "Your concerns are noted, Captain. That's precisely why we have a rigorous testing program ahead of us. Now, if there are no further questions, I suggest we break for lunch before the afternoon demonstration." As the crowd dispersed, Williams leaned closer to Harmon. "Sir, those connection points bothered me too. The specifications show they've designed them for structural integrity, but not for survivability after partial failure." Miller nodded. "Notice the same with the egress routes. Crew compartments look clean in the diagrams, but add equipment and wounded personnel, and those exits become death traps." Cooper looked between them, his earlier enthusiasm tempered. The simulation data seemed impressive, though. The survivability models showed significant improvement over existing platforms. "Simulations don't bleed, Lieutenant," Miller replied quietly. Harmon gathered his notes. "Let's see the actual vehicle before we draw conclusions. Sometimes the devil's in details no PowerPoint will ever show you." Outside, the desert heat had intensified, creating rippling mirages across the distant ranges. The demonstration area had been prepared with viewing stands in a carefully designed obstacle course to showcase the Sentinel's capabilities. The vehicle itself waited at the starting point, its engine idling with a surprisingly quiet hum compared to the roar of traditional armored vehicles. Up close, the Sentinel looked even more futuristic than in the presentations, its angular composite armor gleaming under the merciless sun. Gardner beckoned them toward a shaded area with refreshments. We'll begin the mobility demonstration in 15 minutes. Meanwhile, feel free to examine the static display model. A second Sentinel had been positioned nearby, this one with the crew compartment open for inspection. Harmon led his team directly to it, climbing up the access ladder with the agility of a man half his age. Inside, the contrast with traditional armored vehicles was stark. Gone were the cramped utilitarian spaces he'd known throughout his career, replaced by an almost spaceship-like array of screens, ergonomic seating, and climate control compartments. Touchscreen interfaces for all major systems, a young technician explained proudly. Voice-activated emergency protocols, fully networked battlespace awareness. Harmon ran his hand along the seam where the mission module connected to the drive platform. The interface looked seamless, but his experienced eyes detected subtle weaknesses in the design. Williams had already removed an access panel and was examining the underlying systems. "Sir, take a look at this," she called softly. Harmon moved to her position, bending to examine what she'd found. The main power distribution system crossed the module boundary with minimal redundancy. A single well-placed hit could black out the entire vehicle. "They're assuming the outer armor never fails," Williams whispered. "That's not how combat works." Harmon nodded grimly. "Document everything. We'll compile our observations later." As they continued their inspection, a commotion at the entrance to the demonstration area caught Harmon's attention. A group of officers had arrived, among them a familiar face that sent an unexpected jolt through Harmon's chest. Captain Michael Harmon, his son, walked alongside a lieutenant colonel from the Test and Evaluation Command. At 34, Michael had followed his father into the armor branch, but their paths had diverged years ago when the younger Harmon had embraced the new digital battlefield, while his father remained committed to proven methods. Their relationship had grown strained after Michael's mother died 5 years earlier. Professional disagreements had metastasized into personal distance. They now exchanged birthday cards and occasional phone calls, but little more. "Didn't know he'd be here," Miller murmured, having spotted Michael as well. "Neither did I," Harmon replied, his expression unreadable. They climbed down from the display vehicle just as Gardner approached with the new arrivals. "Captain Harmon," Gardner said with evident satisfaction. "I believe you know Captain Michael Harmon from Test and Evaluation Command. He'll be leading the operational testing phase of the Sentinel program." Father and son faced each other with professional nods that failed to disguise the emotional undercurrents. "Captain," the elder Harmon said formally. "Captain," his son replied with equal formality, though a muscle twitched in his jaw. Gardner looked between them with poorly concealed amusement. "Well, this is fortunate. The Sentinel program will benefit from the diverse perspectives of the Harmon military tradition." The implied contrast between old and new hung in the air. "If you'll excuse us," Gardner continued smoothly, "we should take our positions for the demonstration." As Gardner led Michael and the other officers away, Miller stepped beside his old friend. "That complicates things." "It changes nothing," Harmon replied, though his eyes followed his son's retreating figure. "Our job remains the same." They took their assigned seats in the viewing stand as the demonstration began. The Sentinel performed a series of increasingly complex maneuvers, showcasing its speed, agility, and obstacle crossing capabilities. The 8-wheel drive system did indeed provide impressive mobility, even over the challenging terrain of the test course. Next came a simulated module exchange. Support vehicles moved in, detaching the troop carrier module and replacing it with a command and control variant in just under 40 minutes. The audience applauded at the efficiency of the process. "Now imagine the tactical flexibility this provides commanders," Gardner announced through the sound system. "One chassis, multiple battlefield roles, minimal logistical footprint." Harmon watched carefully, noting how the process required perfect conditions: level ground, no time pressure, no enemy fire. In the chaos of actual combat, such precision would be the first casualty. The final demonstration involved simulated weapons firing, with the Sentinel engaging targets out to 2,000 meters using its remote weapon station. The accuracy was undeniably impressive, with the computerized fire control system scoring direct hits even while the vehicle moved at speed. As the demonstration concluded to enthusiastic applause, Gardner invited the evaluation teams to ask questions of the crew and technicians. Harmon moved immediately to the vehicle now parked at the viewing area. The driver, a sergeant with simulation experience but no combat deployments, answered questions with rehearsed responses that sounded lifted from the technical manual. "How does she handle when the computers go down?" Harmon asked. The sergeant hesitated. "Sir, the systems have multiple redundancies. The likelihood of complete failure is extremely low. But if it happens? There are manual backup procedures, sir, though we haven't had to implement them in testing." Williams was examining the module connection points again, this time from the exterior. "These seams would be natural failure points under explosive stress," she observed. "Has the vehicle undergone live fire testing against the connection points specifically?" The maintenance technician standing nearby shifted uncomfortably. "That's scheduled for the next phase of evaluation." Harmon caught the technician's eye. "So you don't actually know how it performs when hit where it's most vulnerable?" It wasn't a question. The technician looked away. Cooper, meanwhile, was inside the vehicle, examining the crew stations with professional interest. "The networking capabilities are exceptional," he called down. "Full battle space integration with real-time updates." "And when the enemy jams your transmissions?" Miller asked. Cooper's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "There are hardened systems and frequency hopping protocols to prevent that." "Nothing's unjammable," Miller replied. "Not when the other side is determined enough." As the afternoon wore on, Harmon methodically documented his observations, building a comprehensive picture of the Sentinel's capabilities and limitations. What emerged was troubling: a vehicle designed for perfect conditions that hadn't been truly tested against the brutal realities of modern combat. The sun was beginning to set when Gardner called an end to the day's activities. "We'll reconvene tomorrow for the endurance trials and simulated combat scenarios. Captain Harmon, a word before you go." Harmon nodded to his team to continue without him, then joined Gardner at the edge of the demonstration area. "Your questions today were quite pointed," Gardner said once they were alone. "Some might even say hostile to the program." "My job is to evaluate, not validate," Harmon replied. Gardner sighed theatrically. "Bob, may I call you Bob? We're both serving the same country here. The Sentinel represents years of development and billions in investment. It will be deployed regardless of individual opinions." "Then why am I here?" "Because the Army values your experience," Gardner said smoothly. "Your insights could help refine the platform. But there's a difference between constructive criticism and undermining the entire program." Harmon studied the colonel's face. "You're asking me to soften my assessment. I'm suggesting you consider the bigger picture. Your son, for instance, has embraced this technology. His career is tied to programs like Sentinel. A negative evaluation from you could have far-reaching consequences." The threat was clear, wrapped in plausible deniability. "Use my son against me," Harmon thought. A new low, even for a political animal like Gardner. "My report will reflect what I find," Harmon said finally. "Nothing more, nothing less." Gardner's smile vanished. "That would be unfortunate, for everyone concerned." He walked away, leaving Harmon alone in the gathering darkness. Above, stars began to appear in the desert sky, unchanging witnesses to the human dramas playing out beneath them. Later that evening, Harmon sat alone in his temporary quarters, reviewing his notes from the day. A knock at the door interrupted his concentration. "Enter!" he called, expecting Miller or Williams with additional observations. Instead, Michael Harmon stepped into the room, still in uniform but with his collar loosened. Father and son regarded each other in silence for a long moment. "Captain," the elder Harmon finally said. "Dad," Michael replied, breaking the professional facade. "I didn't know you were on this evaluation until Gardner mentioned it this morning." Harmon gestured to the room's only other chair. "Have a seat. Been a while." Michael sat, the familiar military posture softening slightly. 2 years since Christmas. How's retirement planning going?" "It's not. They keep finding last-minute assignments for me." A ghost of a smile crossed Michael's face. "The Army hates letting go of legends." "I'm no legend, just an old tanker who stayed too long at the fair." The awkward silence returned, filled with unspoken history. Harmon studied his son's face, noting the new lines around his eyes, the slight graying at his temples. When had he gotten so old? The image of a small boy riding on his shoulders during a long-ago 4th of July parade flashed through his mind. "Gardner says you're leading the operational testing," Harmon said finally. Michael nodded. "It's a career opportunity. The Sentinel program is priority 1 at Pentagon level." "What do you think of the vehicle, honestly?" Michael hesitated, the conflict between professional advancement and personal integrity playing across his face. It's revolutionary in concept. The modularity alone changes everything about how we deploy armor. That's the brochure. What do you think? His son sighed. There are issues, integration problems between systems. The module interface isn't as robust as they claim, but the potential is there. Harmon nodded slowly. Potential gets men killed when it's deployed before it's ready. The world doesn't stand still, Dad. We can't wait for perfect. The Russians and Chinese are developing similar concepts. We need to stay ahead. At what cost? Michael leaned forward. This isn't Vietnam or even Desert Storm anymore. Future conflicts will be won by information dominance and rapid adaptation. The Sentinel delivers both. Wars are still fought by 19-year-olds who bleed when things go wrong, Harmon replied quietly. His son's expression hardened. You think I don't know that? I've deployed too, Dad. Kosovo, Afghanistan. Different wars than yours, but still war. Harmon raised a hand in acknowledgement. I know you have. I'm proud of your service. The simple statement hung in the air between them, unexpected and powerful. Michael looked away, composing himself. Gardner's got a lot riding on this program, Michael said finally. His promotion to brigadier, defense industry connections after retirement, congressional backers who've staked political capital in Sentinel's success. So I've gathered. He'll fight dirty if he has to. Already has, from what I hear. Michael met his father's eyes directly. Just be careful. Gardner has friends in places you don't. Harmon nodded, understanding the warning. I appreciate the heads up. Michael stood, military bearing returning. I should go. Early start tomorrow. Michael, Harmon said as his son reached for the door. Your mother would be proud of you too. She always was. Something flickered in Michael's eyes, a momentary vulnerability quickly masked. Good night, Dad. After his son left, Harmon returned to his notes with renewed determination. If Gardner was willing to use his son as leverage, what else might he do to protect his precious program? What corners had already been cut in the rush to deployment? The Sentinel's modular design bothered him most. While brilliant in theory, the interface between drive platform and mission module created a structural vulnerability unlike anything in traditional armored vehicles. One well-placed hit could split the vehicle like an egg, trapping or exposing the crew. He pulled up the technical specifications on his laptop, focusing on the connection points. The official documentation showed reinforcement and redundant locking mechanisms, but the physical vehicle he'd inspected told a different story. The production model had clearly been simplified from the design drawings, presumably to save weight or cost. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts again. Enter. Williams stepped inside, carrying her own stack of notes. Sir, sorry to disturb you, but I found something concerning in the maintenance logs. She placed several photocopied pages on the desk. These are from the prototype testing phase. 3 separate incidents of module separation failure during high-stress maneuvers, all logged and then apparently resolved through design modifications. Harmon examined the documents. Where did you get these? One of the maintenance techs, off the record. He's worried about the corners being cut. The logs detailed incidents where the locking mechanisms between modules had partially failed under extreme terrain conditions. The official resolution claimed design modifications had addressed the issue, but the dates indicated minimal time for proper re-engineering. They rushed fixes without proper validation, Harmon muttered. Typical. Williams nodded grimly. There's more, sir. The fuel system routing I mentioned earlier. It violates 3 different safety protocols from the original design specification. They modified it to save weight, but created a critical vulnerability in the process. Harmon leaned back, connecting dots in his mind. They're gambling that the outer armor will never be penetrated. Exactly, sir, which might be reasonable for conventional rounds, but against modern-shaped charges or explosively formed penetrators. The armor fails, the modules separate, and the fuel system ignites, Harmon finished. Catastrophic for anyone inside. Williams handed him one final document. Tomorrow's demonstration scenario. They've choreographed everything to avoid stressing these exact vulnerabilities. The testing plan showed carefully designed obstacles and firing demonstrations, all calculated to showcase strengths while hiding weaknesses. Nothing would push the module connections to their limits or test the fuel system under combat conditions. Thank you, Sergeant. Keep this between us for now. After Williams left, Harmon sat in the darkened room weighing his options. A frontal challenge to Gardner would likely be deflected with bureaucratic maneuvers. The program had too much momentum and political protection to be derailed by conventional means. He needed evidence, undeniable proof that the Sentinel's design flaws posed a clear danger to American soldiers. A plan began to form in his mind. Risky, potentially career-ending if it backfired, but necessary. He'd never shied away from necessary risks, not when lives hung in the balance. Tomorrow's demonstrations would be carefully controlled to hide the Sentinel's vulnerabilities. But what if someone changed the parameters? Forced the vehicle to face realistic combat conditions rather than the sanitized test Gardner had designed. Harmon opened his laptop and began drafting a new testing protocol, one that would reveal the truth about the Sentinel, whatever the professional consequences for himself might be. Outside his window, the desert night had fully descended, stars blazing in the blackness with cold clarity. Somewhere in that darkness, the Sentinel waited, its sleek lines concealing potentially deadly flaws. Harmon thought of the young soldiers who would eventually trust their lives to this vehicle, who would believe in the protection it promised. His responsibility to them outweighed any other consideration. It always had. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, perhaps the final battle of his long career. Not against a foreign enemy, but against the institutional momentum that valued programs over people, politics over protection. Harmon saved his work and closed the laptop. Morning would come soon enough. One last stand for an old tanker who'd seen too many good men die when technology failed to deliver on its promises. He'd need all his strength for what lay ahead. Dawn broke over Fort Irwin with the sudden intensity unique to desert mornings. Captain Robert Harmon had already been awake for hours, reviewing his modified testing protocols and preparing for the confrontation that lay ahead. 35 years of military service had taught him that the most important battles required preparation, patience, and the courage to stand alone if necessary. He dressed methodically, the routine ingrained after decades in uniform. As he fastened his name tape to his chest, he caught his reflection in the small mirror. The face that stared back was weathered by sun and conflict, lined with the weight of commands given and men lost. Today might be his last meaningful act of service, a final stand for the principles that had guided his career. A knock at the door announced Master Sergeant Frank Miller, coffee in hand and concern etched across his features. "You look like hell, Bob," Miller said, offering a steaming cup. "Did you sleep at all?" "Enough," Harmon replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Got our testing modifications mapped out. Gardner won't like them." Miller snorted. "Gardner can go pound sand. Question is whether we can get them implemented." Harmon sipped the bitter coffee, welcoming its familiar burn. "That's where Lieutenant Cooper comes in. He's got access to the testing systems as part of the evaluation team, if he's willing to take the risk." "You think the Academy boy has the stomach for it?" Miller's skepticism was evident. "We'll find out." Harmon gathered his materials and headed for the door. "Wake Williams, meet in my office in 15. We moved before Gardner can circle the wagons." The hallways of the testing facility remained quiet at this early hour, populated only by maintenance staff and a few dedicated officers preparing for the day ahead. Harmon's temporary office was little more than a converted storage room, but it offered the privacy they needed. Cooper arrived precisely on time, his uniform immaculate despite the early hour. The uncertainty in his eyes betrayed his youth, but Harmon recognized something else there too, the moral compass of a good officer facing a difficult choice. Williams appeared moments later, carrying a tablet with additional technical data she'd compiled overnight. "Close the door," Harmon instructed. Once they were seated, he laid out his modified testing protocols. "What I'm proposing goes against the official demonstration plan. Gardner will see it as a direct challenge to his authority in the Sentinel program." He paused, looking at each of them in turn. "Anyone who participates risks professional consequences. I won't order any of you to take that risk." Miller laughed softly. "With respect, Captain, I'm too old and too ugly to care about promotions anymore." Williams nodded. "My father died because someone cut corners on equipment testing. I'm in." All eyes turned to Cooper. The young lieutenant studied the modified protocols, his expression serious. "Sir," he began carefully, "these modifications would stress the vehicle beyond its intended operational parameters." "That's correct," Harmon confirmed, "because the enemy won't respect those parameters. They'll hit us where we're weakest, not where we're strongest." Cooper took a deep breath. "The regulations are clear about authorized testing procedures. They're also clear about our duty to the soldiers who will use this equipment," Harmon countered. "Sometimes those obligations come into conflict." The lieutenant fell silent, internal struggle visible on his face. Finally, he straightened his shoulders. The academy taught us to follow regulations, but also to protect our men at all costs. I believe your modifications are necessary to properly evaluate the Sentinel's combat viability. Harmon nodded once, acknowledging the courage behind the decision. Then we proceed. Cooper, you'll need to input these modifications into the testing system before Gardner's team locks it down. Williams, prepare our independent monitoring equipment. Miller, you're with me. We need to secure the cooperation of the testing crew. They separated to execute their assigned tasks, moving with the practiced efficiency of soldiers on a mission. Harmon and Miller headed directly to the vehicle pool, where the testing crews prepared the Sentinel for the day's demonstrations. The morning sun had fully emerged now, casting harsh light across the testing grounds. In the distance, dust clouds marked the approach of official vehicles, Gardner and his entourage arriving for the day's events. Time was running out. The testing crew chief, a stocky sergeant with grease-stained hands, looked up in surprise as Harmon approached. Captain Harmon, didn't expect brass down here this early. Sergeant Torres, Harmon acknowledged, need a word with you and your team, privately. Torres wiped his hands on a rag and led them to a small shelter away from the Sentinel. His crew, 4 experienced maintenance specialists, followed with curious expressions. What can we do for you, sir? Harmon came directly to the point. Your assessment of the Sentinel. The honest one, not the one in official reports. Torres glanced at his team, then back to Harmon. Years of military service had taught him to read the gravity in a commander's eyes. Between us, sir, it's got problems, serious ones. Harmon nodded. The module connections, fuel system routing. What else? Torres's shoulders relaxed slightly, sensing an ally rather than a threat. Electronics integration is glitchy under high stress. Fire control system loses calibration after sustained operation. Crew egress is compromised when the vehicle sits at certain angles. How much of this has been reported up the chain? All of it, Torres said with evident frustration. 3 separate reports. Each one came back marked resolved without actual fixes implemented. Miller and Harmon exchanged knowing glances. The pattern was familiar, problems documented, then bureaucratically resolved without substantive changes. Today's demonstrations, Harmon continued, the test parameters have been modified to expose these issues rather than hide them. Torres's eyes widened in understanding. That's going to cause one hell of a stir, sir. Yes, it is. I need to know if your team will run the test as modified, or if I need to find alternative personnel. The maintenance team looked to Torres, who considered for a long moment before responding. My brother's in the 1st Armored Division, sir. If this thing deploys with these flaws, he could end up riding in it. He straightened to his full height. We'll run your tests, but I need plausible deniability, something to protect my people. Harmon nodded, understanding the request. You'll receive modified orders through official channels. Follow those orders. If questioned later, you are simply executing approved protocols. Torres seemed satisfied with this approach. We'll be ready, Captain. As they walked away, Miller glanced back at the maintenance team. Good men. The best kind, Harmon agreed. Now we need to secure the testing range before Gardner realizes what's happening. They had just reached the observation bunker when Gardner's convoy arrived, kicking up plumes of desert dust. The colonel emerged from his vehicle looking refreshed and confident, surrounded by staff officers and civilian contractors. Time to face the music, Harmon murmured. Get back to Williams and Cooper. Make sure everything's in place. Miller nodded and departed as Harmon stepped forward to meet Gardner. Captain, Gardner called, his smile not reaching his eyes. Early start today? Enthusiasm for the program is commendable. Just doing my job thoroughly, Colonel, Harmon replied evenly. Gardner's smile tightened. Indeed, I've reviewed yesterday's evaluation notes. Your concerns seem rather extensive. They reflect the vehicle's condition, or perhaps your preconceptions about modern armor systems, Gardner countered smoothly. Change can be difficult to accept, especially for those of us with extensive experience in legacy platforms. The implied criticism of Harmon's age and experience hung in the air, deliberately insulting. Experience isn't a liability, Colonel. It's how we avoid repeating mistakes. Gardner's facade of pleasantry slipped slightly. The Sentinel has undergone rigorous testing protocols developed by the Army's finest engineers. Your subjective impressions, while noted, won't derail this program. Then you have nothing to worry about from today's demonstrations, Harmon replied calmly. Something in his tone caused Gardner to pause, eyes narrowing with sudden suspicion. Before he could respond, an aide approached with an urgent message, drawing the colonel away. Harmon used the opportunity to scan the growing crowd of observers. Senior officers, congressional staffers, defense contractors, and media representatives gathered at the viewing area. The stakes for today's demonstration extended far beyond Fort Irwin. His eyes caught a familiar figure among the arriving personnel. His son, Michael, deep in conversation with the Test and Evaluation Command staff. Michael looked up, meeting his father's gaze across the distance. Something passed between them, unspoken but understood. Whatever their differences, both Harmons recognized the gravity of what lay ahead. Gardner returned, composure restored but wariness evident. The demonstrations will begin in 30 minutes. I trust you'll find them illuminating, Captain. I'm certain I will. As Gardner moved away to greet more important guests, Harmon walked deliberately toward the command bunker, where Cooper should have completed inputting the modified test parameters. His modified scenarios would push the Sentinel well beyond the carefully controlled demonstrations Gardner had planned, testing the vehicle's actual combat capabilities rather than its showcase features. Inside the bunker, Cooper sat at a computer terminal, tension visible in his posture. He looked up as Harmon entered. "It's done, sir. Modified protocols uploaded and locked. They can't be changed without authorization codes that would take hours to override." "Well done, Lieutenant," Harmon said, clapping the young officer on the shoulder. "You've done the right thing." Cooper didn't look convinced. "I hope so, sir. If I'm wrong about this, trust your instincts. They're solid." Williams appeared at the doorway, slightly breathless. "Sir, they're moving the Sentinel to the starting position. Torres gave me the signal, then they're proceeding with our modifications." Harmon nodded. "Then we take our places and let the vehicle speak for itself." They exited the bunker, moving toward the observation area where seats had been reserved for the official evaluation team. Miller waited for them, his expression carefully neutral, despite the tension of the moment. "All set?" Harmon asked quietly. "Ready as we'll ever be," Miller confirmed. And Williams got our sensors placed. "We'll have independent readings of every system during the tests." The desert sun beat down mercilessly as the distinguished guests took their seats. Gardner stood at the podium, preparing to begin his introduction. Behind him, the Sentinel waited at the starting point of the demonstration course, its composite armor gleaming in the harsh light. "Ladies and gentlemen," Gardner began, his voice amplified across the viewing area, "today we demonstrate the next generation of American armored warfare capability. The Sentinel represents a paradigm shift in mobility, firepower, and protection." As Gardner continued his polished presentation, Harmon focused on the vehicle itself. From this distance, it looked impressive, even formidable. But he knew what lay beneath the surface: compromised connections, vulnerable systems, and design flaws that could cost lives in actual combat. Our demonstration will showcase the Sentinel's exceptional capabilities across a variety of terrain and mission profiles, Gardner was saying, beginning with mobility trials designed to replicate the most challenging operational environments our forces might encounter. Harmon tensed slightly. The first modified test would begin momentarily. The Sentinel's engine roared to life, the sound surprisingly aggressive for such a supposedly advanced vehicle. It moved forward smoothly, approaching the first obstacle, a steep incline designed to test climbing ability. According to Gardner's original plan, the incline was moderate, challenging enough to look impressive but well within the vehicle's comfortable operating parameters. Harmon's modifications had increased both the angle and the loose surface material, creating conditions more representative of actual combat zones. The Sentinel began its ascent, 8 wheels gripping for purchase on the shifting surface. Halfway up, the vehicle paused, then surged forward with increased power. A subtle shudder ran through the chassis as the front section strained against the steep grade. "Sir," Williams whispered, pointing to her tablet, "the stress readings at the module connection points are already exceeding recommended maximums." Harmon nodded grimly. As expected, the Sentinel's modular design was showing strain under realistic conditions. The vehicle crested the hill, drawing applause from the audience. Gardner turned to the crowd with a triumphant smile, unaware that the first test had already revealed structural weaknesses. "Next, the Sentinel will demonstrate its obstacle crossing capabilities," Gardner announced. Here, too, Harmon had modified the parameters. Instead of the carefully constructed ditch in the original plan, the Sentinel now faced a wider, more irregular gap with unstable edges, similar to what troops might encounter in areas where IEDs had damaged roadways. The vehicle approached the obstacle at speed, then slowed to navigate the crossing. As the front wheels dropped into the gap, the rear of the vehicle lifted slightly. Stress indicators on Williams' monitoring equipment spiked dangerously. Connection flexing beyond tolerance, she murmured. Fuel lines showing pressure inconsistencies. The Sentinel powered through the obstacle successfully, but Harmon had seen what he feared. Under lateral stress, the connection between drive module and mission module weakened significantly. In combat, such weakness could be catastrophic. Gardner continued narrating the demonstration, his voice betraying no awareness of the vehicle's struggles. As you can see, the Sentinel maintains exceptional mobility across challenging terrain. Now we'll demonstrate the rapid module exchange capability that makes this platform truly revolutionary. This was the critical test. Harmon had modified the exchange protocol to occur on uneven ground rather than the perfectly level surface in Gardner's plan. Such conditions would be common in forward deployment areas. Support vehicles approached the Sentinel, preparing to remove the current mission module and replace it with another variant. The procedure began smoothly, with technicians disconnecting the securing mechanisms and power couplings. As the crane lifted the mission module, the uneven ground caused a slight shift in the drive platform's position. Immediately, warning indicators flashed on the monitoring equipment. Connection points misaligned, Williams reported tensely. They're forcing it. The technicians struggled visibly now, trying to seat the new mission module onto the drive platform. The alignment pins, designed for precise engagement, fought against the slight angular discrepancy caused by the uneven surface. Gardner had moved closer to the operation, his confident demeanor giving way to visible concern. He spoke urgently into his radio, likely instructing the crew to correct the problems before they became obvious to the observers. Too late. The module dropped into place with a metallic groan, audible even at the viewing distance. Warning lights flashed across the vehicle's external indicators. They've damaged the primary connection seals, Williams whispered, eyes on her readings. Structural integrity compromised by at least 30%. Cooper leaned forward, professional interest overcoming his earlier reservations. The interface shouldn't be that sensitive to minor misalignment. The design specifications claimed a 5-degree tolerance in all axes. Specifications versus reality, Harmon replied quietly. Welcome to the difference, Lieutenant. Despite the damage, the crew completed the module exchange. The Sentinel sat motionless for several minutes as technicians worked frantically to restore systems to operational status. Gardner had returned to the podium, filling the awkward delay with additional commentary about the vehicle's design philosophy. Finally, the Sentinel's engine restarted, though Harmon noted the sound had changed subtly. Uneven harmonics suggested mechanical stress in the power transfer systems. Now, Gardner announced with forced enthusiasm, we'll demonstrate the Sentinel's defensive capabilities in a simulated combat environment. This would be the most revealing test. Harmon's modifications included live fire exercises against areas near the compromised connection points, using training rounds that would stress but not penetrate the armor. If the vehicle performed as Gardner claimed, it would shrug off these impacts with minimal effect. If Harmon's concerns were justified, the already damaged connections would show additional deterioration. The Sentinel moved to the firing range, where remote weapon systems waited to engage it with carefully calibrated training rounds. In Gardner's original plan, these weapons would target only the strongest armor sections at predictable intervals. The first shots rang out, training rounds impacting near the Sentinel's front glacis plate. The vehicle continued forward steadily, armor deflecting the projectiles as expected. Then the firing pattern shifted to Harmon's modified sequence. Rounds struck closer to the module connection points, sending vibrations through the already stressed structure. Williams's monitoring equipment showed immediate effects. Connection integrity dropping rapidly, down to 60%, 55%. The Sentinel slowed noticeably, its electronic systems affected by the structural stress. More rounds impacted near the vulnerable seams, each hit further degrading the damaged connections. Gardner was on his radio again, gesturing angrily toward the firing stations. He clearly recognized that the demonstration had deviated from his carefully orchestrated plan. Fuel pressure fluctuating, Williams reported. The lines crossing the module boundary are showing stress fractures. Harmon stood, concern overriding the satisfaction of having his suspicions confirmed. Tell Torres to abort the mobility sequence. That vehicle is becoming dangerously unstable. Cooper relayed the message through his tactical radio, but the Sentinel continued moving, now entering the final phase of the demonstration. A high-speed mobility run combined with weapon firing. "They're not responding," Cooper reported, tension evident in his voice. Harmon scanned the control stations and spotted Gardner arguing with the range safety officer. The colonel appeared to be overriding the abort recommendation, forcing the demonstration to continue despite the warning signs. He's pushing it deliberately, Harmon realized, trying to finish the demo before the problems become catastrophic. The Sentinel accelerated across the range, kicking up massive dust clouds as its weapons engaged distant targets. Despite its impressive speed, Harmon could see the vehicle listing slightly, the damaged connections affecting its balance and stability. "Structural integrity below 40%, Williams called out, alarm evident in her voice. At this point, any significant impact could cause catastrophic module separation. "Who's in the crew compartment?" Harmon demanded suddenly. Cooper checked the manifest on his tablet. "Test crew. Torres, 2 technicians, and—" He paled visibly. "Captain Michael Harmon as evaluation officer." The world seemed to freeze around Harmon. His son was in that vehicle, a vehicle he knew was on the verge of catastrophic failure. Everything else fell away. The professional conflict with Gardner, the career implications of his actions, even his duty to the evaluation process. All that mattered was that Michael was in danger. "Get them out of there," Harmon ordered, his voice deadly calm despite the turmoil within. "Now." Cooper tried again on the radio, but Gardner had apparently ordered radio silence except for his direct channel. The Sentinel continued its high-speed run, now approaching the most challenging section of the course, a series of offset obstacles designed to test chassis articulation. Harmon moved without conscious thought, sprinting toward the range control station where Gardner stood watching the demonstration unfold. Miller followed close behind, understanding his friend's intention without needing explanation. "Gardner!" Harmon shouted as he approached. "Abort the test! The vehicle is failing!" Gardner turned, his expression a mixture of anger and alarm. "Stay back, Captain. You've interfered enough already." "My son is in that vehicle," Harmon said, each word precise and threatening. "The module connections are failing. Abort now." "Your modifications to my testing protocols have compromised the demonstration," Gardner hissed. "This is sabotage, nothing more." Before Harmon could respond, a sound cut through the background noise of engines and weapons fire. A sharp metallic crack, followed by the distinctive hiss of escaping hydraulic fluid. All eyes turned to the Sentinel. The vehicle had struck an obstacle at high speed, the impact transferring through the weakened connection points. As they watched in horror, the mission module began separating from the drive platform, hydraulic fluid and fuel spraying from ruptured lines. The Sentinel ground to a halt, warning lights flashing across its surface. Smoke began rising from the separation point where damaged fuel lines had ignited. "Fire crews, now!" Harmon bellowed, already running toward the stricken vehicle. Years of combat experience took over, his 58-year-old body moving with the urgency of a much younger man. Emergency crews scrambled to respond, but Harmon reached the Sentinel first, Miller close behind. The mission module had partially separated, creating a dangerous gap through which smoke now poured. "Michael!" Harmon shouted, climbing onto the tilted hull. The main crew hatch had jammed in the separation, trapping those inside. Through a viewport, Harmon could see movement in the smoke-filled interior. Training and instinct guided his actions as he located the emergency release for the commander's hatch, a feature he had specifically noted during his earlier inspection. The hatch released with a pneumatic hiss. Inside, Torres was helping one of the technicians toward the opening, while Michael assisted the other, all 4 men coughing in the acrid smoke. "Dad?" Michael's surprise was evident even through the chaos. "Out now," Harmon ordered, military authority overriding the personal connection. They evacuated in sequence, Harmon and Miller helping each man from the damaged vehicle as emergency crews arrived with fire suppression equipment. The fuel fire had spread to the engine compartment, flames now visible beneath the drive module. As the last man cleared the vehicle, a secondary explosion rocked the Sentinel, sending fragments of composite armor into the air. Harmon instinctively covered his son with his body, feeling the impact of debris against his back and shoulders. When he looked up, the Sentinel was fully engulfed in flames, its revolutionary design now a burning testament to the consequences of prioritizing schedules over safety, politics over protection. The emergency crews worked to contain the fire as medical personnel checked the evacuated crew. None had sustained serious injuries, though all showed signs of smoke inhalation and minor burns. Michael sat on the ground, oxygen mask covering his face, eyes fixed on the burning vehicle he had narrowly escaped. Harmon knelt beside his son, words inadequate for the moment. Instead, he placed a hand on Michael's shoulder, the simple gesture conveying what speech could not. Gardner arrived moments later, his perfect uniform now dust-covered, his composed demeanor shattered by the disaster unfolding before him. He stared at the burning Sentinel, the physical manifestation of his career ambitions dissolving into toxic smoke. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he muttered, shock evident in his voice. "But it did happen," Harmon replied, rising to face him. "And it happened exactly as I warned it would. The module connections failed under stress, the fuel system ignited, and the crew nearly died." Gardner's shock transformed into defensive anger. "Your unauthorized modifications pushed the vehicle beyond operational parameters. This is on you, Harmon." "My modifications created realistic combat conditions," Harmon countered, voice level despite his anger. "Conditions these soldiers will face when you deploy this vehicle to the field. The Sentinel failed those conditions catastrophically." A growing crowd had gathered at a safe distance, watching the confrontation with the burning vehicle as backdrop. Among them were the senior officers, congressional staffers, and media representatives who had come to witness a triumphant demonstration of American military technology. "You've deliberately sabotaged a multi-billion-dollar defense program," Gardner said loudly enough for others to hear. "Your actions border on treason." Harmon didn't flinch. "My actions prevented American soldiers from dying in a flawed vehicle. If that's treason, then charge me." Miller stepped forward, positioning himself beside his old friend. "Everything Captain Harmon modified was within authorized testing parameters, Colonel. He simply removed the artificial limitations you placed on the demonstration." Williams and Cooper had arrived as well, forming a protective circle around the still recovering Michael. "The technical data is clear," Williams added, holding up her tablet. "The module connection design is fundamentally flawed. It cannot withstand realistic combat stress." Cooper, surprising even himself, spoke up as well. "Sir, the evaluation protocols require testing under combat representative conditions. Captain Harmon's modifications aligned with those requirements." Gardner looked from face to face, recognizing the unified front before him. Behind him, senior officers were approaching, drawn by the disaster and subsequent confrontation. "This isn't over, Harmon," Gardner said quietly, "not by a long shot." He turned away to intercept the approaching brass, already constructing a narrative to salvage what he could from the situation. Michael removed his oxygen mask, looking up at his father with new understanding. "You knew it would fail." "I knew it had problems that weren't being addressed," Harmon corrected. "Problems that could cost lives in combat. You could have just filed a report." Harmon helped his son to his feet. "Reports get buried. Questions get redirected. I've seen it happen too many times across too many conflicts." Michael studied the burning Sentinel, professional assessment momentarily overriding personal shock. "The modular concept isn't inherently flawed. The implementation is the problem." "Exactly. Rush development, corners cut, safety compromise for schedule and budget." For the first time in years, father and son found themselves in complete professional agreement. The shared moment of clarity seemed to bridge some of the distance that had grown between them. "We should get you checked out at medical," Harmon said, noting his son's singed uniform and soot-covered face. "I'm fine," Michael insisted. "What happens now?" Harmon gazed at the gathering of senior officers where Gardner was gesturing emphatically, clearly trying to control the narrative. Now the real fight begins, the political one. By evening, the Sentinel's charred remains had been removed from the test range, whisked away to a secure facility for forensic analysis. The official story emerging from Gardner's office characterized the incident as an anomaly during extended testing protocols, with no mention of the fundamental design flaws that had caused the failure. Harmon and his team gathered in his temporary quarters, reviewing the data they had collected during the disastrous demonstration. The evidence was irrefutable. The Sentinel's modular design, as currently implemented, posed an unacceptable risk to American soldiers. "They're already spinning it," Miller reported, returning from a reconnaissance mission through the officers' club. "Gardner's people are calling it a valuable learning experience in the development cycle." Williams looked up from her analysis. "The data doesn't lie. The module connection failed exactly as we predicted. The fuel system routing created a secondary fire hazard that nearly trapped the crew." Cooper nodded in agreement. "The basic concept could work, but the execution is fatally flawed. They need to completely redesign the connection system and reroute the critical lines." which means months of delays and millions in additional costs, Harmon concluded. Exactly what Gardner was trying to avoid by rushing to deployment. Michael had joined them after being released from the medical center, still wearing hospital scrubs in place of his damaged uniform. The near-death experience seemed to have stripped away some of the professional reserve that had characterized his recent interactions with his father. Gardner's already working his connections in Washington, Michael reported, calling in favors, spinning the narrative. He's trying to paint you as a saboteur, Dad, a dinosaur resisting progress. Harmon nodded, unsurprised. Standard playbook, discredit the messenger when you can't dispute the message. What's our next move? Williams asked. We document everything, Harmon replied. Every test result, every warning indicator, every flaw we've identified. Then we go through official channels with our findings. Cooper looked skeptical. With respect, sir, if Gardner has the political connections he claims, those findings might never see the light of day. That's why we prepare for alternative approaches, Harmon agreed. But we do this by the book first. Give the system a chance to work. The meeting continued late into the night as they assembled their report, documenting in meticulous detail the Sentinel's failures and the specific design flaws responsible. Throughout the process, Harmon felt a growing sense of professional satisfaction watching his team work together. Cooper's academic knowledge complemented Williams's practical engineering skills, while Miller's decades of field experience provided context for their technical findings. Michael brought valuable perspective from the Test and Evaluation Command, identifying the specific requirements the Sentinel had failed to meet. By midnight, they had produced a comprehensive report that no honest evaluation could dismiss. Whether it would receive an honest evaluation remained to be seen. The following morning brought new complications. Harmon was summoned to the base commander's office, a stark space dominated by a desk that seemed deliberately oversized to intimidate visitors. Brigadier General Wallace studied Harmon with the calculated neutrality of a senior officer navigating a political minefield. Behind him, Gardner stood with barely concealed triumph. Captain Harmon, Wallace began without preamble, I understand you modified authorized testing protocols without proper clearance yesterday. I adjusted the parameters to create realistic combat conditions, sir, Harmon replied, standing at parade rest. All modifications fell within approved testing guidelines. Wallace glanced at a document before him. Colonel Gardner's report indicates otherwise. He states that you deliberately sabotaged the Sentinel demonstration to validate your personal bias against the program. The demonstration validated technical concerns documented in my evaluation reports, sir. Reports that had previously been ignored. Gardner stepped forward. Captain Harmon has opposed the Sentinel program from the beginning, General. His actions yesterday endangered personnel and destroyed a $60 million prototype. With respect, sir, Harmon countered, the design flaws in the Sentinel endangered those personnel. My modified tests simply revealed problems that would have emerged in combat, where the cost would be measured in soldiers' lives, not dollars. Wallace studied both men, the tension between them palpable. This puts me in a difficult position, gentlemen. The Sentinel program has significant congressional support and represents years of development work. Yet we cannot field equipment that endangers our troops. The concept remains sound, Harmon offered. The implementation requires significant redesign, particularly the module connection system and critical line routing. That would delay deployment by at least 18 months, Gardner objected. Our operational timeline doesn't allow for such delays. Better delayed than deadly, Harmon replied evenly. Wallace leaned back, making a decision. Captain Harmon, pending a full investigation of yesterday's incident, you are relieved of your evaluation duties, effective immediately. You will return to Fort Hood and await further instructions. The order stung, though Harmon had expected nothing less. Gardner's influence had achieved its intended effect. And my evaluation team, sir? They will continue their work under Colonel Gardner's supervision. Harmon nodded once, accepting the decision while recognizing its implications. His team would now operate under the direct control of the man most invested in bearing their findings. General, Harmon said carefully, I've prepared a comprehensive report detailing the specific design flaws identified during testing. I believe it's crucial this information be included in the investigation. He placed a sealed folder on the general's desk. Wallace regarded it thoughtfully before nodding. I'll ensure it receives proper consideration, Captain. Gardner's expression darkened, but he remained silent. The damage control had begun, but Harmon had ensured his findings would at least enter the official record. Dismissed, Captain. Outside the commander's office, Harmon found his son waiting, concern evident in his posture. They're sending you home, Michael said. It wasn't a question. Standard procedure. Create distance between the problem and the messenger. They walked together toward the barracks, the morning sun already heating the desert air around them. What happens to your team? Michael asked. They stay to continue the evaluation under Gardner's supervision. Michael understood the implications immediately. He'll control everything they see and report. That's the idea, Harmon paused, considering his next words carefully. You're still part of the test and evaluation command. Your position gives you access they don't have. His son caught his meaning instantly. You want me to be your eyes and ears. I want you to do your job with integrity. The rest follows naturally. Michael nodded slowly, the weight of the moment evident in his expression. Gardner will watch me closely now. He knows we're reconnecting. Gardner sees threats everywhere, Harmon replied. Use that paranoia against him. Be the perfect officer on the surface while paying attention to what matters. They reached the barracks entrance where Miller waited, concern etched across his weathered features. They're sending me to the showers, Frank, Harmon confirmed. You, Williams, and Cooper stay behind to continue the evaluation. Miller's expression darkened under Gardner's thumb. Under his scrutiny, not his control, Harmon corrected. Keep doing your jobs properly. Document everything. Trust Cooper more than you have been. The kid's got a solid core underneath that academy polish. Miller nodded reluctantly. How long before you ship out? Transport leaves at 1400. Just enough time to pack and make a few calls. The three men stood in momentary silence, soldiers contemplating a battlefield that had shifted from desert terrain to bureaucratic corridors. This isn't over, Miller said finally. Not while that rolling coffin threatens our people. Not even close to over, Harmon agreed. Gardner won the first round by political maneuvering. But we've got the facts on our side, and sooner or later, facts matter. As Michael and Miller departed to prepare for the day's activities, Harmon entered his quarters to pack his meager belongings. 35 years of military service had taught him to travel light, both physically and emotionally. His phone rang as he was folding his uniforms. The caller ID showed a Washington, D.C. number he didn't recognize. Captain Harmon, he answered. Captain, this is Congressman James Landry, House Armed Services Committee. The voice carried the practiced authority of a career politician. I understand there was an incident with the Sentinel program yesterday. Harmon's instincts sharpened immediately. Congressional interest could change the entire dynamic, for better or worse. Yes, sir, a demonstration revealed critical design flaws in the vehicle's modular interface system. So I've heard, Landry replied, from multiple sources, in fact. Sources concerned that a vital defense program is being mismanaged at the expense of soldier safety. Harmon chose his words carefully. The Sentinel concept has merit, Congressman. Its current implementation has serious safety deficiencies that nearly cost lives during testing. Nearly cost the life of your son, I'm told. The personal connection hadn't taken long to surface. Harmon recognized the politician's technique. Establish an emotional hook to build rapport. My son was among those endangered, yes, along with 3 other American soldiers whose lives matter equally. Landry made an approving sound. Well said, Captain. I'm contacting you because my committee has received conflicting reports about yesterday's incident. Colonel Gardner describes it as sabotage of an otherwise successful program. Others characterize it as a vital safety test that prevented future casualties. I've filed a comprehensive report documenting the specific technical failures, Congressman. A report currently buried in General Wallace's office, I suspect. Landry paused meaningfully. My committee is considering hearings on the Sentinel program, Captain. Hearings that would benefit from first-hand testimony about these safety concerns. The implication was clear. Landry was offering Harmon a platform to bypass the military chain of command and bring his concerns directly to Congress. Such action would effectively end his military career, but might save the lives his report was designed to protect. I serve at the pleasure of the United States Army. Congressman, Harmon replied carefully. My report follows the proper channels for addressing equipment safety concerns. And if those channels prove inadequate, Landry pressed, then I would reconsider all available options to ensure American soldiers aren't endangered by equipment failures. The congressman seemed satisfied with this answer. Fair enough, Captain. I'll be monitoring the situation closely. Expect further contact from my office. After the call ended, Harmon sat on his bunk, considering the implications. Congressional intervention could force a complete reevaluation of the Sentinel program, potentially validating his concerns and mandating the necessary design changes. It could also create a political firestorm that might damage multiple careers, including his own. The proper military response would be to trust the chain of command, to believe that his report would receive fair consideration despite Gardner's influence. Decades of service had taught him the value of this system, imperfect though it sometimes was. Yet those same decades had shown him how political pressure and career ambitions could override safety concerns, especially in high-profile programs with significant investment. Good soldiers had died because of such compromises. He had carried their bodies from the battlefield, written letters to their families, lived with the knowledge that some deaths could have been prevented. His thoughts were interrupted by another knock at the door. Williams entered, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. "Sir, I've been reviewing the technical data from yesterday's failure," she began without preamble. The module separation wasn't just a result of connection stress. There's evidence of substandard materials in the critical components. Harmon's attention sharpened. "Explain." Williams placed her tablet before him, displaying microscopic images of the failed connection points. These fasteners should be military-grade hardened steel. The failure patterns show characteristics of commercial-grade substitutes. "Cost-cutting," Harmon muttered, the pieces falling into place. They substituted cheaper components to stay within budget constraints. "Exactly. And there's more." Williams scrolled to another set of images. The hydraulic systems use non-standard fittings that don't meet military specifications for extreme temperature operation. In desert conditions or Arctic environments, these would fail predictably. The implications were staggering. Beyond design flaws, the Sentinel incorporated substandard materials that virtually guaranteed failure under combat conditions. "Who would authorize these substitutions?" Harmon asked, though he suspected the answer. "I accessed the change order documentation," Williams replied. Final authorization came from Colonel Gardner personally, overriding objections from the engineering team. Harmon stood, processing this new information. "Do Miller and Cooper know about this?" "Not yet. I came to you first." "Good. Keep this between us for now." He studied the evidence on her tablet. "This changes things significantly. Gardner didn't just rush an imperfect design. He knowingly compromised critical safety components." Williams nodded grimly. "Criminal negligence at minimum, sir." "Document everything, Sergeant. Keep copies secured separately from our main report. This level of misconduct requires special handling." After Williams departed, Harmon completed his packing with mechanical efficiency, his mind processing the implications of these new revelations. The stakes had risen considerably. What he had believed to be aggressive schedule pressure now appeared to be deliberate malfeasance, placing budget considerations above soldier safety. The congressman's offer of a hearing platform now took on new significance. Such evidence might not receive fair consideration through standard military channels, especially if Gardner had allies throughout the chain of command. As the transport time approached, Harmon performed a final check of his quarters. The sparse room had been his home for only a few days, yet the events within these walls would potentially impact thousands of soldiers' lives. Miller appeared at the doorway as Harmon lifted his duffel bag. "Transport's here, Captain." "Thanks, Frank." Harmon surveyed the room one last time. "Keep the team focused on documentation. Everything by the book. Always." Miller hesitated, then added, "Gardner's already reassigning personnel. Cooper's being transferred to administrative duties, away from the technical evaluation." "Isolating potential threats," Harmon noted. "Expected but telling. He's scared." "Should be. That vehicle's a death trap, and he knows it." They walked together toward the waiting transport, the desert sun beating down with indifferent intensity. "I may be called to Washington," Harmon said quietly. "Congressional hearing on the program." Miller nodded, understanding the implications. "Going outside the chain, big step. Last resort only. The system should work if we give it a chance. And if it doesn't?" Harmon stopped, facing his old friend directly. "Then we do whatever's necessary to protect our people. Same as always." At the transport, Michael waited alongside Williams and Cooper, all three standing at attention despite the informal nature of the departure. "Quite the send-off for an old tanker," Harmon remarked. "Thought you should see your team once more before you go." "Sir," Miller explained, "remind you what you're fighting for." Harmon nodded, grateful for the gesture. He approached each team member individually, beginning with Cooper. "Lieutenant, you've shown real character these past days. Remember that integrity matters more than advancement." Cooper straightened. "Yes, sir, thank you for the example." To Williams, Harmon spoke more quietly. "Secure that evidence we discussed. Multiple copies, multiple locations. Trust no one outside this circle with it." Understood, sir. I'll protect it. Finally, he stood before his son. Professional distance warred with paternal pride as he studied the younger man's face. Captain, he said formally, then softened. Michael, watch your back. Gardner's desperate now, which makes him dangerous. I know how to navigate Pentagon politics, Dad, Michael replied with a hint of their old friction. This goes beyond politics. He substituted substandard materials in critical safety components. That's criminal negligence. Michael's expression hardened as the full implications registered. You're certain? Williams has the evidence. Gardner knowingly compromised soldier safety to meet budget constraints. Father and son regarded each other with new understanding. Whatever their professional differences, both were soldiers first, committed to protecting those under their care. I'll do what's necessary, Michael promised quietly. Harmon nodded once, words unnecessary between them. He turned to address the group one final time. This isn't just about one vehicle or one program. It's about the fundamental contract between soldiers and their nation. We accept the risks of combat willingly. We don't accept being sacrificed to political expediency or budget constraints. The four faces before him reflected unified purpose, despite their diverse backgrounds and perspectives. I may be physically removed from this fight, but I remain engaged. Continue documenting every flaw, every substitution, every compromise. The truth is our strongest weapon. With final handshakes and nods of respect, Harmon boarded the transport that would carry him from Fort Irwin back to Fort Hood. As the vehicle pulled away, he watched his team through the rear window, four figures standing straight against the desert backdrop, guardians of a truth that powerful forces sought to suppress. The battle had shifted from the testing range to the quarters of power, from desert terrain to political landscapes. Yet the stakes remained the same. American lives hanging in the balance of decisions made far from the front lines. Harmon settled into his seat as the transport cleared the main gate, heading toward the highway that would eventually lead to the airport. 35 years of service had prepared him for many challenges, but perhaps none as consequential as the one that now lay before him. The evidence Williams had uncovered transformed what might have been dismissed as over-aggressiveness in program management into something far more serious. Criminal negligence with potential manslaughter charges if soldiers died in a vehicle known to be dangerously flawed. His military career was likely over, regardless of the outcome. If he followed the chain of command and the system worked as intended, Gardner would face consequences while Harmon would be quietly retired with his reputation intact, but his influence ended. If the system failed and he went to Congress, he would be labeled a whistleblower, valorized by some but ostracized by the institution that had defined his adult life. The transport's air conditioning, fought a losing battle against the desert heat as Harmon considered his options. Through the window, he watched the harsh landscape roll past, unchanging yet beautiful in its severity. Like combat itself, the desert offered no compromise, no middle ground, only clarity through adversity. His phone vibrated with an incoming message. Michael had sent a single text. Do what's necessary. We stand with you. Harmon allowed himself a rare smile. Whatever came next, he would not stand alone. And in the end, that had always been the true strength of soldiers. Not the weapons they carried or the vehicles they rode, but the unbreakable bonds forged through shared purpose and mutual trust. The transport crested a hill, revealing the vast expanse of desert stretching toward the horizon. Somewhere in that distance lay the answers that would determine the fate of the Sentinel program and potentially thousands of American soldiers who would one day trust their lives to the vehicles designed to protect them. For now, Harmon could only prepare for the battles ahead, gathering his strength for what promised to be the most challenging conflict of his long career. Not a battle fought with tanks and shells, but with evidence and testimony, with truth against deception. A different kind of warfare, but with stakes no less significant than any he had faced on traditional battlefields. Fort Hood sprawled across the Texas landscape like a small city dedicated to the machinery of war. Captain Robert Harmon stood at his living room window, watching dawn break over the military installation that had been his professional home for decades. 3 days had passed since his unceremonious removal from the Sentinel evaluation team, 3 days of official silence that spoke volumes about the forces aligning against him. His small on-base housing unit reflected the Spartan existence of a career soldier. No family photos adorned the walls. After his wife's death 5 years ago, he had stored most personal items away. Only his military commendations remained visible, not from pride, but as reminders of the responsibilities that came with the command. The coffee in his hand had grown cold, forgotten as he contemplated the choices before him. His phone sat on the kitchen counter, Congressman Landry's contact information displayed on the screen. One call could initiate congressional hearings that would expose the Sentinel program's flaws to public scrutiny. Such action would end his military career, but potentially save countless lives. The alternative was to trust the system that had defined his adult life, to believe that his report would receive fair consideration through proper channels despite Gardner's political connections. Decades of service pulled him toward this path of institutional loyalty. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Miller's name appeared on the display. "Frank," Harmon answered. "Situation report?" "Getting worse," Miller replied without preamble. "Gardner's running damage control at full throttle. He's convinced General Wallace that the module separation was caused by improper testing procedures, not design flaws." Harmon absorbed this information with grim resignation. "Any access to the test vehicle remains?" "Negative. They've sequestered everything at a secure facility." Williams tried to examine the connection points again, but was denied access. Official investigation is now classified. "And the team?" "Cooper's been completely sidelined, pushing papers in the administration office. Williams is still on technical evaluation, but restricted to reviewing only approved documentation. I'm being watched constantly." "Michael?" "Still involved, but isolated. Gardner's people intercept any communication between him and us." Miller paused, then added, "He managed to pass a message, though. They're accelerating the program despite the failure. New demonstration scheduled for 3 weeks from now with a modified prototype." Harmon paced his small kitchen, processing the implications. 3 weeks isn't enough time for proper redesign of the connection systems. They're applying band-aids to critical flaws. "That's our assessment, too. But Gardner's secured additional funding to address concerns while maintaining the deployment timeline." "He's doubling down," Harmon concluded. "Too committed to change course now." "What's our play?" Miller asked, the question weighted with decades of shared combat experience. Harmon glanced at his phone. Congressman Landry's number still displayed. "Continue documentation, preserve all evidence. I'm exploring alternative channels." After ending the call, Harmon dressed methodically in his uniform. Whatever path he chose, he would face it as a soldier. The morning routine grounded him in familiar discipline as his mind worked through the implications of Gardner's accelerated timeline. A knock at the door disrupted his thoughts. Opening it revealed a young specialist with an official envelope. "Captain Harmon, orders from command, sir." Harmon accepted the envelope with a nod, dismissing the messenger before breaking the seal. Inside, a single page contained terse instructions: temporary reassignment to administrative duties pending completion of the Sentinel investigation. Effective immediately. The message was clear. He was being sidelined, removed from any position with operational influence until the Sentinel program cleared its critical milestones. By the time any investigation concluded, the vehicle would already be in production, its flaws sealed behind classified reports and official approvals. Harmon placed the orders on his kitchen table, decision crystallizing in his mind. The system he had trusted throughout his career was being manipulated to silence legitimate safety concerns. The institutional channels he respected were being circumvented by political influence and career ambitions. American soldiers would pay the price for this corruption, just as they had in past conflicts when equipment failures caused preventable casualties. He had carried too many flag-draped coffins to allow history to repeat itself when he had the power to prevent it. Harmon picked up his phone and dialed Congressman Landry's number. "Congressman," he said when the call connected, "this is Captain Robert Harmon. We need to talk about the Sentinel program. I'm prepared to testify." 2 weeks later, Harmon sat in a private congressional office in Washington, D.C., reviewing his prepared testimony with Landry's staff. The contrast between military directness and political calculation created a palpable tension in the wood-paneled room. "Remember," the congressional aide was saying, "focus on the technical flaws and safety implications. Avoid language that could be construed as personal attacks on Colonel Gardner or the program leadership." Harmon nodded, though inwardly he questioned the distinction. Gardner's decisions had directly compromised safety in pursuit of career advancement. That wasn't personal, it was factual. "The subcommittee has allocated 30 minutes for your testimony," the aide continued. "Expect interruptions from representatives with ties to defense contractors. They'll attempt to undermine your credibility or reframe your concerns as resistance to innovation." I'm familiar with ambushes, Harmon replied dryly. The aide smiled thinly. Of a different sort, perhaps. Washington battles are fought with words and procedural maneuvers, not tanks. The casualties are careers and reputations rather than soldiers. With respect, Harmon said, this particular battle will determine whether actual soldiers become casualties. That reality tends to clarify one's perspective. Before the aide could respond, Congressman Landry entered, hand extended in practiced welcome. Captain Harmon, thank you for your courage in coming forward. Few have the integrity to risk their careers in service of the truth. Harmon accepted the handshake with military precision. My career concerns me less than the lives at stake, Congressman. Of course. Landry gestured toward the leather chairs arranged around a coffee table. Please sit. There have been some developments you should know before tomorrow's hearing. They settled into the chairs as the aide discreetly withdrew from the room. Landry's expression shifted from political affability to focused intensity. The Defense Department is mobilizing significant resources to counter your testimony, he began without preamble. They've prepared a comprehensive rebuttal claiming the Sentinel's issues have been addressed in the modified prototype. They'll present simulation data showing the new design meets all safety parameters. Simulations can be manipulated, Harmon noted. The actual test failure proves the fundamental design vulnerabilities. Agreed, which is why this arrived this morning. Landry removed a flash drive from his pocket. Delivered anonymously to my office, it contains the original technical specifications for the Sentinel alongside documentation of the unauthorized material substitutions Gardner implemented to cut costs. Harmon felt a surge of professional satisfaction. Williams had found a way to deliver her evidence despite the security restrictions. These specifications directly contradict the official documentation, Landry continued. They prove Gardner knowingly compromised critical safety components while certifying the vehicle met military standards. That's criminal negligence, Harmon stated. Potentially, but more importantly for tomorrow's hearing, it's irrefutable evidence that cannot be dismissed as the subjective concerns of a traditional tanker resistant to innovation. Landry smiled tightly. Gardner's entire defense strategy collapses against these documents. Harmon studied the congressman thoughtfully. Landry clearly had political motivations beyond soldier safety, likely related to oversight authority and budgetary control. Yet their immediate goals aligned, exposing the Sentinel's dangerous flaws before American lives were lost. There's something else you should know, Landry added, his expression sobering. Your son has been reassigned to lead the modified Sentinel demonstration next week. The timing doesn't appear coincidental. The information struck Harmon like a physical blow. Gardner was using Michael as insurance against his testimony, placing him in a position where Harmon's actions could directly impact his son's career and reputation. Michael's a capable officer, Harmon said carefully. He'll perform his duties with integrity. I'm sure he will, Landry agreed, but his involvement creates complications, personal ones. The unspoken question hung in the air. Would Harmon's testimony change knowing his son's professional future was now directly tied to the Sentinel program? My testimony will reflect the facts as I observe them, Harmon stated firmly. The safety of American soldiers transcends personal considerations. Landry nodded, apparently satisfied. The hearing begins at 9 tomorrow. The Defense Department representatives will testify first, followed by Colonel Gardner himself. You'll be the final witness, which gives you the opportunity to address their claims directly. After the meeting concluded, Harmon walked alone through the evening streets of Washington, the Capitol's monuments illuminated against the darkening sky. The political power concentrated in these few square miles controlled the machinery of war from safe distances, making decisions that would determine who lived and died on faraway battlefields. His phone vibrated with an incoming message. Michael had texted, "Heard about tomorrow. Do what you must. Truth matters most." The simple message eased the weight on Harmon's shoulders. Whatever career repercussions his son might face, Michael understood that integrity couldn't be compromised, especially when lives hung in the balance. Harmon's hotel room offered a view of the Pentagon across the Potomac, its massive structure housing the administrative apparatus that supported America's global military presence. Somewhere in that building, Gardner and his allies were preparing their counterattack, developing strategies to neutralize the threat Harmon's testimony represented. Sleep came fitfully that night, his mind cycling through combat memories spanning decades. Vietnam, Desert Storm, peacekeeping operations in the Balkans, the invasion of Iraq. Different conflicts with the same fundamental truth. When equipment failed, good soldiers died. No amount of political spin or budget considerations could change that reality. Morning arrived with the disciplined efficiency that had characterized Harmon's military career. He dressed in his formal uniform, the ribbons and decorations on his chest telling the story of a life dedicated to service. As he fastened the final button, his phone rang. "Captain Harmon," he answered. "Dad," Michael's voice carried through the connection, strong despite the circumstances. "Just wanted to wish you good luck today." "Thank you, son." Harmon paused, choosing his words carefully. "I understand you're leading the modified Sentinel demonstration next week. Gardner's idea, transparent attempt to create leverage against your testimony." Michael's tone reflected his father's directness. "Won't work. I've conducted my own evaluation of the modifications. They've reinforced the connection points but haven't addressed the fundamental design flaws in the module interface." Harmon felt a surge of paternal pride mixed with professional respect. "Document everything. Create your own assessments separate from the official reports." "Already am. Gardner doesn't realize I've been running independent stress tests on the components. The modifications buy maybe 15% more structural integrity. Nowhere near enough for actual combat conditions." "Be careful, Michael. Gardner's desperate now." "I know." His son paused, then added, "Tell the truth today, Dad, all of it. Whatever happens to my career, I can live with it. I couldn't live with staying silent if it meant other soldiers dying in preventable accidents." The call ended with the unspoken understanding that had finally developed between them. Respect that transcended their professional differences. Trust that had weathered years of distance. Harmon placed his testimony notes in his briefcase and left the hotel, ready to face the political battlefield that awaited him. The spring morning felt crisp with possibility, the capital city awakening to another day of power dynamics and policy decisions. Capitol Hill loomed ahead, the distinctive dome representing both the democratic ideals he had sworn to defend and the political machinery that sometimes undermined those same principles. The congressional hearing room where he would testify was located in one of the House office buildings adjacent to the Capitol itself. Security was thorough but efficient, recognizing his military identification and directing him to the appropriate committee room. Inside, the space was arranged with formal precision, a raised dais where committee members would sit, witness tables positioned before them, and gallery seating for media and observers. Harmon took his assigned place, arranging his materials and water bottle with military neatness. The room gradually filled with staffers, media representatives, and interested parties from the defense industry and military advocacy groups. Congressman Landry appeared briefly at his side. Gardner arrived with a full entourage. Deputy Secretary Matthews is here personally to represent the Defense Department position. They're pulling out all stops. Harmon nodded unsurprised. The Sentinel program represented billions in defense contracts and years of institutional investment. Those with stakes in its success would fight fiercely to protect it. At precisely 9 o'clock, the committee members filed in, led by Chairman Representative Eleanor Dawson. The proceedings began with formal opening statements establishing the hearing's purpose: evaluation of safety concerns in the Sentinel Armored Vehicle Program. Deputy Secretary Matthews testified first, his polished delivery reflecting years of Washington experience. He acknowledged the regrettable incident during testing, but characterized it as a valuable opportunity for design refinement rather than an indication of fundamental flaws. The modified Sentinel prototype has addressed all identified concerns, Matthews assured the committee. Simulation testing confirms the vehicle exceeds required safety parameters by significant margins. The program remains on schedule for initial deployment early next year. Committee questions followed predictable patterns. Representatives with defense contractors in their districts emphasized the jobs and economic benefits the Sentinel program provided. Those with more oversight inclinations pressed on the testing, failure, and subsequent modifications. Throughout, Matthews maintained the official narrative. Minor issues identified and resolved. Program proceeding as planned, America's warfighters would receive a revolutionary vehicle that enhanced both capability and protection. Colonel Gardner testified next, his uniform immaculate, his delivery precise and confident. He directly addressed the testing incident, characterizing it as the result of unauthorized protocol modifications that pushed the vehicle beyond established operational parameters. The Sentinel performed exactly as designed under approved testing scenarios, Gardner stated. The failure occurred only when subjected to unrealistic stress conditions that no vehicle would encounter in actual operations. The implied criticism of Harmon's modified testing was clear. Gardner was establishing a narrative that positioned Harmon as a saboteur rather than a safety advocate. The connection system has been reinforced in the modified prototype, Gardner continued. Additional structural supports have been added at all critical junctures, and the fuel routing has been redesigned for enhanced protection. These improvements make an already exceptional vehicle even more reliable in combat conditions. Representative Carson, a former Navy officer with a reputation for detailed questioning, leaned into his microphone. Colonel, the initial failure occurred during what was described as a module exchange operation on uneven terrain. Would you classify uneven terrain as an unrealistic condition for battlefield operations? Gardner's composure showed its first crack, quickly masked. The specific angle of displacement during the unauthorized test exceeded operational guidelines. In actual field conditions, crews would select appropriate terrain for module exchanges. And if appropriate terrain isn't available, Carson pressed, if a unit needs to change modules under enemy fire or in adverse conditions, standard operating procedures would address those contingencies, Gardner replied smoothly. The modified design provides significantly greater tolerance for non-optimal conditions. The questioning continued for nearly an hour, with Gardner maintaining his position that the Sentinel's issues had been identified and resolved. He repeatedly emphasized the vehicle's revolutionary capabilities while minimizing the significance of the testing failure. Finally, it was Harmon's turn. He approached the witness table with the steady confidence of a man who had faced far more dangerous situations than congressional testimony. His opening statement was characteristically direct. I appear before this committee as an advocate for the American soldiers who will stake their lives on the Sentinel vehicle if it deploys in its current configuration. My concerns are not about resistance to innovation or adherence to tradition. They are about fundamental safety flaws that simulation testing cannot address and hasty modifications cannot resolve. Harmon detailed the specific design vulnerabilities identified during testing, the module connection points that failed under realistic stress, the fuel system routing that created secondary fire hazards, the egress limitations that could trap crews and damage vehicles. Most concerning, Viv continued, is the documented substitution of commercial-grade materials for military specification components in critical safety systems. These substitutions were implemented to reduce costs and maintain schedule, not because they provided equivalent performance. A murmur ran through the gallery at this direct accusation. Gardner's face had reddened noticeably while Deputy Secretary Matthews leaned over to whisper urgently to his aides. I have provided this committee with technical documentation comparing the original design specifications to the actual components used in the test vehicle, Harmon continued, referencing the flash drive Williams had delivered to Landry. These documents clearly show that Colonel Gardner personally authorized material substitutions that compromise vehicle integrity while certifying that military specifications had been maintained. The hearing room fell silent as the implications registered. Harmon was alleging not just poor judgment, but potentially criminal misconduct. The Sentinel concept has merit, Harmon acknowledged. A modular armored vehicle could provide significant tactical advantages if properly implemented. But the current design prioritizes schedule and budget over soldier safety. The modifications implemented since the testing failure are cosmetic rather than structural, addressing symptoms rather than root causes. Chairman Dawson leaned forward. Captain Harmon, these are serious allegations. Colonel Gardner testified that the modifications have resolved all safety concerns identified during testing. With respect, Madam Chairman, simulation data can be calibrated to produce desired results. The actual test failure demonstrated catastrophic structural compromise under conditions far less demanding than actual combat. The modified prototype has not been subjected to equivalent stress testing, Representative Carson interjected. Colonel Gardner characterized your testing modifications as unauthorized and unrealistic. How do you respond? My modifications created conditions representative of actual battlefield environments, Harmon replied steadily. Every parameter remained within authorized testing guidelines, though they exceeded the artificial limitations Colonel Gardner had imposed to ensure successful demonstrations. The questioning intensified as committee members probed the technical details of Harmon's concerns and the potential implications for soldier safety. Throughout, he maintained the disciplined focus that had characterized his military career, presenting facts without emotional overlay despite the personal stakes involved. Near the end of his testimony, Representative Wilson, a reliable defender of defense programs, attempted to undermine Harmon's credibility directly. Captain, isn't it true that you've consistently opposed modernization initiatives throughout your career? That your preference for traditional tank platforms colors your assessment of the Sentinel program? Harmon met the accusation with calm precision. I've served in Abrams tanks, Bradley fighting vehicles, and Stryker combat vehicles. Each platform has strengths and vulnerabilities. My concern isn't with modernization, but with sending American soldiers into combat in vehicles that cannot withstand the stresses they will inevitably face. He paused, then added with quiet intensity, I've written too many letters to parents explaining why their children aren't coming home. I've carried too many flag-draped coffins. When equipment fails because someone cut corners to meet a deadline or save money, those deaths aren't just tragedies. They're betrayals of the fundamental contract between this nation and the young men and women who defend it. The hearing room remained silent for several seconds after Harmon concluded, the power of his simple statement hanging in the air. Even Representative Wilson seemed momentarily subdued by the authentic conviction behind Harmon's words. Chairman Dawson finally broke the silence. Thank you, Captain Harmon. This committee will evaluate all testimony received today alongside the technical documentation provided. Our recommendations regarding the Sentinel program will follow this comprehensive review. As the hearing concluded, Harmon gathered his materials with military precision, avoiding eye contact with Gardner and the Defense Department contingent. He had done what duty required, speaking truth regardless of the professional consequences. What happened next was beyond his control. In the hallway outside, reporters clustered with recording devices and cameras, seeking comments on the dramatic testimony. Harmon moved past them with polite but firm refusals, maintaining the discipline that had defined his career even in this civilian setting. Landry intercepted him near the building exit, steering him toward a private office. Powerful testimony, Captain. The materials substitution documentation hit like a bombshell. Gardner looked physically ill when you presented it. Harmon nodded once, acknowledging the assessment without celebration. What happens now? The committee will deliberate, but the momentum has shifted significantly. At minimum, they'll recommend a complete reevaluation of the Sentinel design with independent oversight. Gardner's career is effectively over once the materials substitution documentation goes public. And the immediate demonstration scheduled for next week? Likely to proceed, Landry admitted. The Defense Department will want to counter today's testimony with a successful demonstration of the modified prototype. Your son remains in a difficult position. Harmon absorbed this reality with characteristic stoicism. Michael would face his own test of integrity, caught between institutional pressure to validate the modified Sentinel and his professional assessment of its continuing flaws. He'll do what's right, Harmon said simply. Back at his hotel, Harmon found Miller waiting in the lobby, his weathered face betraying unusual tension. Frank, didn't expect to see you here? Caught the first transport I could after your testimony wrapped. We've got a situation developing. They moved to a quiet corner of the lobby, away from other guests. Gardner's in full panic mode, Miller explained in low tones. He's ordered all documentation related to the material substitutions destroyed. Williams managed to secure backup copies before they locked down the servers. But she's being watched constantly now. Not surprising, Harmon noted. The evidence I presented establishes criminal liability if soldiers die in vehicles with known defects. There's more, Miller continued grimly. The modified prototype scheduled for next week's demonstration has the same substandard connection components as the original. They've reinforced the structure around them, but haven't replaced the actual materials. Harmon processed this information with growing concern. Michael will be commanding that vehicle during the demonstration. Exactly. And Gardner has modified the demonstration parameters to include extreme stress testing, supposedly to prove the design improvements work under all conditions. The implication was clear. Gardner was gambling everything on a high-risk demonstration that could potentially vindicate the program if successful. If it failed, Michael and his crew would bear the consequences. We need to warn him, Harmon said, already reaching for his phone. Miller shook his head. Communications are being monitored. Gardner has convinced command that information security is critical following your testimony. Any warning would be intercepted. Harmon's mind worked through tactical options with the efficiency developed over decades of combat command. When's the demonstration scheduled? Tuesday at Fort Irwin, 4 days from now. Then we need to be there in person. Flights to California? Miller nodded. Already booked us on tomorrow morning's first flight to Los Angeles. Williams is trying to get technical specifications on the exact modifications they've made to the prototype. Cooper's using his administrative position to access the demonstration protocols. Harmon felt a surge of pride in his team's initiative. Even separated and under surveillance, they continued working toward the mission that mattered, protecting soldiers from preventable harm. "We'll need transportation from Los Angeles to Fort Irwin," Harmon noted. "Handled. Old friend from Desert Storm runs a helicopter charter service now. He'll get us there under the radar." The next morning found them boarding a commercial flight to Los Angeles, two aging soldiers in civilian clothes carrying the weight of urgent mission parameters. Harmon had slept little, his mind processing contingency plans for every scenario they might encounter. "Gardner's desperate," Miller observed as their flight reached cruising altitude. "Putting Michael in command of the demonstration is a calculated risk. If something goes wrong, he can claim it was operator error rather than design failure. And if nothing goes wrong, he uses Michael's involvement to discredit my testimony as personally motivated," Harmon added. "Either way, he's using my son as a weapon." "Michael's smart. He knows what he's walking into. Knowledge doesn't stop bullets," Harmon replied grimly, "or catastrophic equipment failures." Their flight landed in Los Angeles by mid-afternoon. Miller's contact met them at a private airfield away from the main terminals, his helicopter fueled and ready for immediate departure. The desert landscape blurred beneath them as they flew toward Fort Irwin, the National Training Center sprawling across the harsh terrain. "We'll set down outside the main perimeter," the pilot explained through their headsets. "Old maintenance access point that doesn't get much attention. Friend of mine in security will meet you there." Night had fallen by the time they reached the drop-off point, the desert air cooling rapidly after sunset. A lone figure waited beside a utility vehicle, recognizable as Williams even in the dim light. "Captain," she greeted as they approached. "Situation's deteriorating fast. Gardner's pushed the demonstration forward, now scheduled for tomorrow morning instead of Tuesday." "He knows we're coming," Miller concluded. "Most likely," Williams agreed. "The modified prototype arrived yesterday. They've been running preliminary checks around the clock. I managed to access the maintenance bay briefly. Confirmed what we suspected, same substandard materials at the connection points, just reinforced with additional support structures." Harmon processed this information with the calm efficiency of a combat commander. "Where's Michael now?" "Crew briefing in the Tactical Operations Center, scheduled to run through morning. Gardner has him isolated from regular communication channels." "And the demonstration parameters?" Williams produced a tablet from her pack. Cooper downloaded them before his access was revoked. "They've increased every stress factor by at least 30% from standard protocols. The modified Sentinel will be pushed well beyond normal operational limits." Harmon studied the demonstration plan with growing concern. The sequenced obstacles, live fire testing, and high-speed maneuvers would place enormous strain on precisely the components most vulnerable to failure. "This isn't a demonstration," he concluded. "It's a desperate gamble. Gardner's betting everything that his modifications will hold together just long enough to validate the program." "And if they don't?" Miller asked, though he clearly knew the answer. "Then my son and his crew pay the price." Harmon looked up from the tablet, decision crystallizing in his mind. "We need to stop this demonstration before it starts." Williams nodded agreement. "Cooper's working on accessing the vehicle's diagnostic systems remotely. If we can trigger critical error codes in the pre-operation checks, they'd be forced to postpone." "Good. But we need backup plans, multiple approaches." Harmon turned to Miller. "Can your security contact get us into the maintenance bay tonight?" "Should be possible. Shift change at midnight creates a 15-minute window. Then we prepare for direct intervention. If we can't stop the demonstration through official channels or remote access, we physically prevent that vehicle from operating." The desert night enveloped them in darkness as they planned their approach. Three soldiers preparing for a mission where the objective wasn't destroying an enemy, but preventing a potential tragedy born of institutional momentum and career ambition. At precisely midnight, they moved through the security perimeter using the access codes provided by Miller's contact. The maintenance bay loomed ahead, its exterior lights creating pools of harsh illumination against the surrounding darkness. "Two guards at the main entrance," Williams reported after reconnaissance. "Standard rotation puts them on break in 7 minutes." Harmon nodded, checking his watch with the habitual precision of a career soldier. When the guards moved inside for their scheduled break, the team advanced quickly across the open space, using the practice movement techniques developed across decades of combat operations. Williams bypassed the electronic lock with impressive efficiency, granting them access to the cavernous maintenance bay where the modified Sentinel waited for morning's demonstration. The vehicle sat in the center of the space, tools and diagnostic equipment arranged around it. 30 minutes maximum before the guards complete their interior rounds, Miller warned, taking position near the entrance to provide early alert if security patterns changed. Harmon and Williams moved directly to the Sentinel, her technical expertise guiding them to the critical access panels. Inside, the modified connection system between drive module and mission module revealed Gardner's approach. Additional support structures surrounding the same fundamentally flawed components. They've doubled the reinforcement plates, Williams observed, adds structural rigidity, but doesn't address the material quality issues in the connection points themselves. Harmon examined the modifications with experienced eyes. Its patchwork might hold together under moderate stress, but will still fail catastrophically under sustained pressure. Options? Williams asked, already accessing the vehicle's diagnostic computer. Two approaches, Harmon replied, technical and mechanical. Can you access the onboard systems to flag critical errors? Williams nodded, fingers flying across the diagnostic interface. I can modify the connection stress sensors to report readings outside acceptable parameters. Should trigger automatic safety protocols during pre-operation checks. Do it. Meanwhile, I'll create a mechanical issue they can't ignore. While Williams worked on the electronic systems, Harmon examined the physical components with the practiced eye of someone who had maintained armored vehicles throughout his career. He identified the critical hydraulic lines that controlled module alignment during operation, a system that would undergo pre-check inspection but wouldn't be visually obvious if subtly compromised. With careful precision, he loosened specific fittings enough to ensure slow seepage under pressure. Not enough to cause immediate failure, but sufficient to prevent the vehicle from passing safety checks when powered up for demonstration. Guards returning, Miller called softly from his position. 2 minutes. Williams completed her electronic modifications and disconnected from the diagnostic system. Done. Modified sensors will report critical stress warnings during power-up sequence. Time to withdraw, Harmon confirmed, ensuring no evidence of their presence remained. They exited the maintenance bay seconds before the guards returned, moving through shadows back toward their concealed position outside the perimeter. The desert night concealed their retreat, stars blazing overhead with cold clarity against the blackness. Think it will work? Miller asked once they had reached safety. Gardner's desperate, Harmon replied. He might override initial warnings, but he can't ignore hydraulic failures without risking immediate catastrophe. Either way, it buys time for the congressional investigation to impact the program. They made camp in an abandoned maintenance shed near the old access point, the desert night turning bitterly cold around them. Harmon sat watch while the others rested, his mind cycling through contingency plans if their sabotage proved insufficient. Dawn broke with the sudden intensity unique to desert mornings. In the distance, activity increased around the demonstration area as personnel prepared for the high-profile event. Media representatives and senior officials would be arriving soon, expecting to witness the triumphant validation of the modified Sentinel. Williams' tablet connected to the base network through a carefully disguised access point, allowing them to monitor communications related to the demonstration. Vehicle pre-check scheduled for 0700, she reported. First diagnostic warnings should appear then. Harmon nodded, checking his watch. 30 minutes until their interventions would be discovered. He thought of Michael, likely already preparing his crew for the demonstration, unaware of the additional protection his father had implemented during the night. At precisely 7, increased chatter on the maintenance frequencies indicated the pre-checks had begun. Williams monitored the communications with intent focus. Initial power-up complete, she narrated. Diagnostic systems running, first warning flags appearing now, connection stress sensors showing readings outside acceptable parameters. Harmon listened as the maintenance team responded to the unexpected warnings, their professional concern evident in their communications. They're running secondary diagnostics, Williams continued. Hydraulic pressure test initiated, pressure dropping in the main connection systems. They've identified the seepage points. Miller grinned slightly. That should do it. No way they send that vehicle out now. The satisfaction proved short-lived. New voices entered the communication channel, including one unmistakably belonging to Colonel Gardner. He's ordering them to reset the sensor parameters, Williams reported with growing concern. Claims the readings are calibration errors, not actual stress indicators. The hydraulic issues, Harmon asked. Maintenance team is pushing back, recommending full system replacement before operation. Williams paused, listening intently. Gardner's overriding them, ordering temporary seals and pressure adjustment. He's telling them the demonstration cannot be delayed for minor maintenance issues. The implications were clear. Gardner was pushing forward despite clear safety warnings, gambling that the vehicle would hold together through the demonstration despite known issues. We need to get closer, Harmon decided. Monitor the situation directly and be prepared to intervene if necessary. They moved toward the demonstration area, using maintenance access routes to avoid security checkpoints. The viewing stands were already filling with distinguished guests as they found position near the vehicle staging area. From their concealed vantage point, they could see the modified Sentinel being prepared for demonstration. Maintenance crews worked frantically to address the issues identified during pre-checks, applying temporary fixes under Gardner's direct supervision. Michael appeared with his demonstration crew, conducting their own inspection of the vehicle before accepting command. Even from a distance, Harmon could read his son's body language, professional but concerned, questioning the maintenance chief about the issues discovered during pre-checks. He knows something's wrong, Miller observed. Look at how he's examining those connection points. Harmon nodded, paternal pride mixing with professional concern. Michael was demonstrating the situational awareness that distinguished good officers from merely adequate ones, sensing problems beneath the surface reassurances. The demonstration schedule proceeded despite the maintenance issues. Gardner stood at the podium, welcoming the assembled dignitaries and media representatives with practiced confidence. Today we demonstrate the enhanced capabilities of the modified Sentinel, his amplified voice carried across the viewing area. Following valuable feedback from initial testing, our engineering team has implemented key improvements that make this revolutionary vehicle even more capable and reliable under combat conditions. In the staging area, Michael and his crew completed final preparations, communicating through their helmet microphones as they conducted systematic checks of all vehicle systems. From his position, Harmon could see his son paying particular attention to the module connection points that had failed in the previous demonstration. Gardner's cut 10 minutes from the pre-demonstration checks, Williams noted, consulting the updated schedule on her tablet, rushing them through procedures that should take twice as long. The modified Sentinel's engine roared to life, the sound carrying across the demonstration area as Michael guided the vehicle toward the starting position. Even through binoculars, Harmon could see warning indicators illuminated on the vehicle's diagnostic panels, deliberately ignored as the demonstration began. Ladies and gentlemen, Sherry Gardner announced, the Sentinel will now demonstrate its exceptional mobility across challenging terrain, followed by live fire exercises combining movement and targeting accuracy. The demonstration began with the Sentinel navigating a series of obstacles designed to showcase its all-terrain capabilities. The 8-wheel drive system performed impressively across ditches, inclines, and water obstacles, the vehicle moving with surprising agility for its size. He's taking it easy on the connection points, Miller observed as Michael guided the Sentinel through the course, adjusting approach angles to minimize lateral stress. Harmon nodded, recognizing the subtle tactics his son employed to protect his crew while still completing the required demonstration elements. Michael was buying time, following orders while minimizing risk through skilled vehicle handling. The mobility phase concluded without incident, drawing appreciative applause from the observers. Gardner returned to the microphone, confidence visibly growing as the demonstration proceeded without the failures he had feared. Next, the Sentinel will demonstrate its rapid module exchange capability, transitioning from troop carrier used to command and control configuration in under 40 minutes. This would be the critical test. The module exchange process placed maximum stress on the connection points that had failed catastrophically in the previous demonstration. Despite the reinforcements added to the modified prototype, the fundamental material weaknesses remained. Support vehicles approached the Sentinel, preparing to execute the module exchange. Michael positioned the vehicle on the designated pad, noticeably more level than the uneven ground Harmon had specified in his modified testing protocols. He's favoring the vehicle, Williams noted, following Gardner's controlled demonstration parameters instead of realistic conditions. Smart move, Harmon replied, minimizing risk while completing the required elements. He knows those connection points won't handle lateral stress. The module exchange proceeded methodically, technicians disconnecting the securing mechanisms and power couplings with practiced efficiency. As the crane lifted the current mission module clear, Harmon studied the connection points through binoculars, noting subtle deformation even under these controlled conditions. Stress indicators are climbing, Williams reported, having hacked into the vehicle's telemetry. Connection points showing strain beyond recommended parameters even on level ground. The new mission module was positioned above the drive platform, technicians guiding it into precise alignment before lowering it into place. The process completed without visible incident, though Harmon noted increased activity around the diagnostic panels immediately afterward. Warning indicators active across multiple systems, Williams confirmed. They're overriding safety protocols to continue the demonstration. Gardner appeared unaware or unconcerned about these issues as he continued narrating the demonstration with unwavering confidence. As you can see, the module exchange process has been refined for maximum efficiency while maintaining full structural integrity. This capability provides unprecedented tactical flexibility for commanders in the field. The final demonstration phase would prove most dangerous: high-speed mobility combined with live fire exercises. This combination would place maximum stress on the already compromised connection system while adding the vibration and recoil forces of weapons firing. The Sentinel moved toward the firing range, its newly installed command and control module gleaming in the desert sun. Through binoculars, Harmon could see his son communicating intensely with his crew, likely discussing the warning indicators they were experiencing. "He's going to abort," Miller predicted. "Too many red flags for a responsible commander to ignore." Before Michael could make that decision, Gardner's voice cut through the demonstration area again. The Sentinel will now demonstrate its offensive capabilities while maintaining high-speed mobility, proving that this platform delivers unprecedented combinations of firepower and maneuver. Harmon watched as Michael hesitated momentarily before acknowledging the command. The Sentinel accelerated across the range, its weapon systems engaging remote targets with impressive accuracy despite the speed. But something was wrong. Even from a distance, Harmon could see the vehicle developing a subtle oscillation as it moved, the telltale sign of structural stress affecting handling characteristics. The modified connection points were beginning to fail under combined pressures of high-speed movement and weapons recoil. "Connection integrity dropping rapidly," Williams reported urgently, "below 60% and falling. They need to abort now." Harmon was already moving, abandoning their concealed position and sprinting toward the demonstration area. Miller and Williams followed without hesitation, understanding the urgency without requiring explanation. On the range, the Sentinel's oscillation had become visibly pronounced, the vehicle slowing as Michael obviously recognized the dangerous deterioration occurring. Through binoculars, Harmon could see his son ordering the gunner to cease fire, prioritizing crew safety over demonstration requirements. Gardner was on the radio immediately, his voice carrying through the demonstration area's sound system due to a monitoring channel left active. "Captain Harmon, continue the demonstration as ordered. Complete the firing sequence at maximum velocity." Michael's response was professional but firm. "Negative, sir. Vehicle showing critical stress warnings. Continuing would endanger the crew. Aborting demonstration run and returning to maintenance area." The Sentinel slowed further, turning away from the high-speed course toward the staging area. Gardner's face had reddened visibly as he realized his showcase demonstration was unraveling before the assembled dignitaries and media. "Captain Harmon, this is a direct order. Complete the demonstration sequence as planned." Michael's response never came. As the Sentinel executed its turn, a sharp metallic crack echoed across the demonstration area. The reinforced connection points had finally surrendered to the combined stresses, beginning the catastrophic separation process that had nearly claimed lives in the previous demonstration. Harmon broke into a full sprint as he saw the mission module begin separating from the drive platform, his 58-year-old body propelled by paternal instinct and decades of combat-honed reactions. Behind him, Williams was already calling for emergency response teams on her communications device. Unlike the previous failure, Michael and his crew had anticipated the possibility of module separation. The Sentinel ground to an immediate halt as warning systems activated, the crew implementing emergency protocols developed specifically after the earlier incident. Harmon reached the vehicle as Michael and his crew were evacuating through the emergency hatches, their training evident in the disciplined evacuation despite the dangerous situation. Hydraulic fluid and fuel leaked from ruptured lines at the separation point, creating a growing hazard. "Clear the area," Michael ordered as he recognized his father approaching. "Fuel lines compromised, fire risk imminent." They retreated to save distance just as the first flames appeared at the separation point, the leaked fuel igniting as electrical systems sparked from damaged connections. Unlike the previous catastrophic fire, The emergency shutdown procedures implemented by Michael's crew contained the damage to the connection area itself. Fire suppression teams arrived moments later, quickly bringing the situation under control. The modified Sentinel sat partially separated and smoking, a vivid demonstration not of revolutionary capability, but of persistent fundamental flaws. Gardner appeared shell-shocked as he stared at the damaged vehicle. His carefully orchestrated vindication transformed into irrefutable confirmation of the very flaws Harmon had testified about before Congress. The assembled dignitaries and media representatives had witnessed the failure firsthand. No amount of spin or technical explanation could override the visual evidence of the Sentinel's design inadequacies. Among them, Congressman Landry stood with arms folded, grim satisfaction evident in his posture. "You made the right call," Harmon told his son as they watched the fire crews complete their work. "Recognize the danger and prioritize your crew's safety over orders." Michael nodded, professional composure masking the adrenaline that must have been coursing through his system. The reinforcements bought some time but didn't address the fundamental material issues. Exact same failure mode as the original prototype. "You documented everything? Full recordings from all crew stations, warning indicators, system failures, the works." Michael managed a tight smile. "Some lessons from the old man stuck with me." Gardner approached them, his perfect uniform now disheveled, his composed demeanor shattered. "Captain Harmon, both of you, this incident will be thoroughly investigated for potential operator error and protocol violations." The elder Harmon turned to face him directly. "The failure mode was identical to the previous incident, Colonel. Same substandard materials, same catastrophic separation under stress. The only difference was my son recognized the danger signs and acted to protect his crew before it became fatal." "You did this," Gardner accused, desperation evident in his voice. "Somehow you sabotaged the vehicle." "The vehicle sabotaged itself," Michael replied evenly. "The connection points failed exactly as the technical assessment predicted they would. I have complete system recordings documenting the progressive failure sequence." Before Gardner could respond, military police approached with Congressman Landry and several senior officers. "Colonel Gardner," the senior MP announced formally, "I'm instructed to escort you to the commander's office. Your access to the Sentinel program has been suspended pending investigation." Gardner's face drained of color as the implications registered. "On whose authority?" "Direct order from the Secretary of Defense," Landry supplied with evident satisfaction. "Following my committee's initial findings in today's rather convincing demonstration of continuing safety issues." As Gardner was escorted away, Landry turned to the Harmons. "Impressive timing, Captain, both of you. One testifies to Congress about catastrophic design flaws. The other demonstrates those exact flaws before a live audience of decision-makers and media representatives. Couldn't have choreographed it better myself." The aftermath unfolded with the methodical precision characteristic of military operations transitioning to administrative processes. Gardner faced criminal charges for knowingly authorizing substandard materials in critical safety components while certifying military specification compliance. The Sentinel program entered comprehensive redesign under new leadership, with both Harmon serving as technical consultants to ensure soldier safety remained the priority. 1 month later, Robert Harmon stood on the porch of his small home at Fort Hood, watching the Texas sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. His retirement papers sat signed on the kitchen table inside, his 35 years of service officially concluding at the end of the month. The screen door opened as Michael joined him, 2 beers in hand. Their relationship had transformed in the crucible of the Sentinel crisis, professional respect evolving into genuine connection that had begun healing years of distance. "Got the final program revision approved today," Michael reported, handing his father a bottle. "Complete redesign of the module connection system, military spec materials throughout, redundant safety systems, the works." Harmon nodded approval. "Timeline?" 18 months to new prototype. Testing protocols completely overhauled too. No shortcuts, no artificial limitations. They stood in companionable silence, watching the sunset deepen toward twilight. The Sentinel crisis had cost both men professionally, the elder Harmon's whistleblower status ensuring his career ended at captain despite his distinguished service, the younger Harmon's involvement guaranteeing he would advance no further than major despite his evident abilities. Neither expressed regret for these consequences. Some principles transcended career advancement. Some responsibilities outweighed personal ambition. "You know," Michael said finally, The redesigned vehicle will actually be pretty revolutionary once they fix the fundamental flaws. The modular concept itself is sound. Always was, his father agreed. Just needed to be implemented with safety as the priority, not schedule or budget. Another silence, comfortable rather than strained. The cooling evening air carried sense of Texas summer, so different from the desert where their shared crucible had played out. What will you do after retirement? Michael asked eventually. Harmon considered the question, one he'd avoided confronting directly until now. Been offered a position with the Congressional Oversight Committee, technical advisor on armor programs. You should take it. Thinking about it? Still feels strange walking away from uniform after all these years. Michael studied his father's profile against the darkening sky. You wouldn't be walking away from what matters, just continuing the fight on a different battlefield. Harmon nodded slowly, recognizing the wisdom in his son's perspective. Throughout his career, his fundamental mission had remained constant: bring American soldiers home alive. The uniform and rank were merely means to that end, not the end itself. Maybe I will, he said finally. Someone needs to keep an eye on the next generation of Iron Chariots. Make sure they protect our people properly. The sunset faded into twilight, father and son watching as the first stars appeared in the Texas sky. Between them stretched new understanding, the shared recognition that their highest loyalty had never been to institution or career, but to the fundamental responsibilities of leadership. Some battles were fought with tanks across desert landscapes. Others played out in hearing rooms, in testing facilities. But the stakes remained the same: American lives entrusted to their care, a trust neither Harmon would ever betray, whatever the personal cost. In that, the son had truly learned his father's most important lesson. Not tank tactics or battlefield maneuvers, but the uncompromising integrity that formed the backbone of true leadership. The willingness to stand alone when necessary, to speak truth regardless of consequence, to protect those under your command, even against threats from within your own ranks. As darkness settled fully across the landscape, they raised their bottles in a silent toast. To battles fought and lessons learned. To principles upheld and lives saved. To the sacred trust between those who lead and those who follow, a trust that formed the true foundation of America's military strength. The last captain, and the son who carried his legacy forward, united in purpose, if not in rank. Guardians of a tradition more enduring than any technology or tactical doctrine, the tradition of placing soldier safety above all other considerations, whatever the cost.